Chapter 150. Was it because of that medicinal pill? It must be because of that medicinal pill. If he had only used the heavenly fire to save the person inside would not have survived. At most, they would only be struggling at death's door for a moment. However, after that woman took that magical medicinal pill, she immediately recovered and woke up. Anyone would be very emotional and interested in this kind of life-saving thing, especially after witnessing its effects with their own eyes. Some of the surrounding adventurers were above board, while some were secretly sizing up Eve and Zicheng. Especially they paid more attention to Zicheng. For a woman who could casually take out such a magical medicinal pill, no one dared not to be interested in her. In the world of magic and swords, there were naturally medicines that could improve one's strength and heal injuries. However, in this continent people were more familiar with potions. It was not that there were no medicinal pills, but the refining method of medicinal pills had always been in the hands of the ancient Eastern countries. Except for the black-haired and black-eyed Easterners, generally no one would learn how to refine medicinal pills. The most important thing was that even if they wanted to learn, the alchemists of the ancient Eastern countries would not easily pass it on. Refining medicinal pills was different from refining medicinal pills. As long as one wanted to become a pharmacist, one could go to the pharmacist department of the major academies to register. After entering the academy, one could also receive systematic training. On the continent, the refining method of many medicinal pills was not a secret. Many people knew about it. However, knowing about it did not mean that one could refine it. Don't look at how the pharmacist department did not accept people, but there were only a few who could really advance to the legendary pharmacist level or even higher. The inheritors of the alchemists of the ancient Eastern countries were more secretive. An alchemist usually would not accept too many disciples. Accepting 2 or 3 disciples was already considered a lot. Most alchemists would only accept 1 disciple in their lifetime. Therefore, the profession of alchemist was rarer than pharmacist. Many people would see a lot of medicinal pills in their lifetime, but it was possible that they would not see what medicinal pills looked like in their lifetime. Most of the medicinal pills that people knew were just hearsay. Now, in this Tomb of the Gods, they actually saw a young girl take out a legendary medicinal pill. It would be strange if they were not shocked to the point that their eyeballs almost fell out. Fuck. It turned out that the legend was true. He had long heard that the alchemy techniques of the ancient Eastern country were very mystical. He didn't expect to see it with his own eyes today. A person whose life was about to be cut off just by eating a pill, and his life force was immediately restored. This was simply too inconceivable. If it was a potion, it would have to be at least a legendary level potion to have such an effect. If that little girl could take out such a miraculous pill to save her companion, she should have a lot of it on her. If she only had one, they didn't believe that she would take it out to save someone. This kind of miraculous pill was not enough for herself. How could she take it out to save someone? Anyway, they won't believe it. Do you believe it? Mingxi's group didn't seem to notice those covetous gazes and just sat there calmly. Ajur and Fengwu each took out delicious food and precious spiritual fruits. They generously took them out to share with everyone. Mingxi took the spiritual fruit that Fengwu girl handed to him. He was very surprised. He knew that most of the spiritual fruit trees were controlled by magical beasts. As a human, unless you had powerful strength, it was impossible to snatch food from the mouths of magical beasts. However, the Fengwu girl did it. Although he didn't know how Fengwu did it, it didn't prevent him from looking at Fengwu in a new light. No matter what method Fengwu used, she successfully proved her strength. When Fengwu saw Mingxi take the spiritual fruit she handed over, her expressionless face flushed with excitement. She looked extremely adorable. Mingxi instantly felt that the girl in front of him was unexpectedly cute. He now somewhat understood why Elena always said that Fengwu was so adorable that it made people want to bury their heads in her chest. What was he thinking? After Mingxi covered it up with a light cough, he immediately shifted his gaze away. He no longer looked at Fengwu's cute little face that could make people have nosebleeds. After 2 hours, people appeared in the hall from time to time. The siblings Tingfeng and Tingyu, Peiqing, Arguros and Ruglas, who hadn't appeared until now, also appeared in these 2 hours. Seeing them appear, everyone was finally relieved. At least no one in their temporary team died in this tomb of the god of sin. Because there was still some time before the 100 people who passed the test, The people who arrived in the hall sat in groups of 2s and 3s. There were also people who stood or sat alone against the pillars. In short, the hall was filled with chatter. It wasn't as quiet as Fengwu and the others had first seen. Most of the people who came later had heard from others that Zicheng had used a miraculous pill to save their friends. Most of them expressed their own ambitions for that mysterious pill. It seemed that Zicheng would become the target of most people in the second stage of the test. Who asked her to reveal her wealth? There were very few weaklings among the adventurers who could train in the two-realm battlefield. Every expert's hands were stained with the blood of others. Killing others and seizing their treasures was something that these adventurers didn't feel any pressure at all. The entire hall was filled with a surging undercurrent. Almost everyone's attention was focused on Zicheng. Although they wanted the inheritance, there was only one inheritance. Whether or not they could obtain it was still uncertain. However, everyone had seen the pill on Zicheng. If they could obtain it, wouldn't that be equivalent to having an extra life? Somewhere in the hall, in an inconspicuous corner, an old man who looked rather down and out sat alone in a corner of the hall. Beside the old man was a cute young girl who looked to be 15 or 16 years old. This young girl was delicate and cute, especially her pair of naturally seductive eyes. As long as she took a liking to any man, that man would definitely give her his heart. Although the young girl's body wasn't as developed as Elena's, she definitely surpassed most girls of her age. An old man and a beautiful young girl. This combination sat in a small corner without attracting anyone's attention. Grandpa, will there really be that thing here? The young girl knew that a soundproof barrier had been set up around the two of them. However, she still deliberately lowered her voice when she spoke. There's more than a 50% chance that there will be. The old man's eyes suddenly lit up. In that instant, he didn't look like an old man in his twilight years at all. Unfortunately, this light flashed and the old man returned to being an inconspicuous old man in everyone's eyes. No one noticed the slight change in the old man. Chapter 151. Just as everyone was waiting for the second test to arrive, when the last person entered the hall, the voice that had sounded in the first test appeared again. Heavenly God Khan's voice sounded again. Little fellows, congratulations on reaching the second stage. After passing this stage, you will be able to reach the final place where I, Khan, will inherit my legacy. There, one of you will receive my legacy. The number of people who can pass the last test is 10. Once the number is reached, the 10 people who pass the second test will be automatically teleported to the final place of inheritance. Good luck, adventurers. I will wait for you at the final place of inheritance. Don't make me wait too long. After saying these words, Kaven's voice gradually disappeared from the hall. At this time, a large door appeared in front of everyone. Everyone looked at each other. For a moment, no one approached the door that suddenly appeared. At this time, the door opened by itself. With a creak, the door that was almost as tall as the roof of the hall opened. Inside the door, a white light shone. No one knew what was inside the door. The white light hit everything inside the door. Some people didn't want to be the first to rush because they weren't sure if there was great danger ahead. They just wanted others to explore the way first. Some people thought that first come first win. They didn't want to fall behind others. After all, there were only 10 places. If they could pass the test first, then they would have a better chance of receiving the inheritance. There were quite a number of people who thought this way. The moment the door opened, most of the adventurers, whether they were swordmasters or magicians, started running as fast as they could. They all wanted to enter the door as soon as possible, shake off the crowd, and become one of the 10 people who passed in the end. Fengwu and the others didn't go inside until most of the people had gone through the gate. Everyone was guessing what kind of world was behind the door, but they didn't think that they would see such a scene. After all 100 people entered the gate disappeared, and they arrived at a pitch-black cave. There were 5 passages in the cave, and no one knew where these 5 passages led to. Some of the passages seemed to be filled with red light, some made people feel cold, and some were pitch-black, to the point where they couldn't even see their own fingers. In short, each of the 5 passages looked different. There was a sign next to each passage. On it was written that each passage was limited to 20 people. In other words, the team of 100 people had to move separately. Those who entered earlier had already chosen the passage they wanted to take. Those who were slow could only choose the ones left behind by others. Although the sun and moon couldn't be seen in the cave, there were rows of luminous pearls inlaid on the walls. These luminous pearls weren't great treasures. They were only used for illumination. However, because they could emit light at night and were exceptionally beautiful at night, they were very popular with noble ladies. Therefore, the price had always been very high. Now, in such a cave, there were rows of luminous pearls. Should it be said that this was God's graveyard? If it weren't for God's inheritance in front of them, the luminous pearls on the walls might have been dug out by these adventurers. Fengwu and the others, including the newly joined Drew, had a total of 15 people. It was a little difficult for 15 people to fit into a team. While Fengwu and the others were still discussing which passage to take, most people had already chosen their own. When 20 people entered a passage, that passage would disappear. When Fengwu and the others were discussing which passage to take, 1 or 2 passages had already disappeared. This meant that 40 people had already entered those 2 passages. The remaining people could only choose a passage that didn't have enough people to take. Of the 2 passages that disappeared, one had a trace of golden light. It looked like the light of a treasure. The other was a relatively normal passage. There was no special light, nor did they feel any special energy flashing. In short, this was the most normal passage. Of these 2 passages, one might have a treasure, and the other might not be so dangerous. Naturally, it was the first choice of the adventurers who entered this level. Now there were only 3 paths left to choose from, and these 3 paths had already been chosen by many people. It was basically impossible for a team to stay together. Fortunately, they didn't have much hope for the whole team to stay together. In the end, everyone decided to follow their own feelings and choose the most suitable passage for themselves. Skycliff unsurprisingly chose the passage that emitted cold air. Ajur chose the red passage. This guy was red and he was most sensitive to this color. Ajur originally wanted to take Fengwu with him through the red passage. Unfortunately, after Tingfeng, Tingyu, Ruglas and Elena joined in, the red passage was full. There was no space for Fengwu at all. Fengwu didn't care which path she took. To her it was the same. After waving goodbye to Ajur and the others, Fengwu chose the path that was so dark that she couldn't even see her own fingers. Mingxi originally wanted to take the passage that was full of cold air with Skycliff, but when he saw Fengwu choose the dark passage alone, he frowned. He was still worried and walked to Fengwu's side. Drew and Peiqing also chose the same passage as Fengwu. As for the rest of the people, they all chose the passage that Skycliff first chose. Those who chose the dark passage were slow or had difficulty choosing. Most of them chose the dark passage because the other passages were full. They had no choice but to choose the dark passage that no one was optimistic about. It was obvious that this path was dangerous. Moreover, it was extremely dangerous. Those who chose this path were either really confident or had no choice. The last 2 passageways were finally filled with people. The entrances to the passageways disappeared, and the cave behind them turned into a mountain wall. There was no light to illuminate the cave. When the light disappeared, some people reflexively tried to use magic to create a ball of light, but they found that magic didn't work. Their magic and combat aura had all disappeared. They seemed to have become ordinary people. What's going on? Since they couldn't see each other, they could only confirm each other's age, gender, and location through their voices. The person who spoke didn't sound very loud. It was a young man and he didn't seem to be more than 30 years old. At this time, the young man's voice was full of panic. In this continent that relied on strength without the strength to survive, it was like how modern humans couldn't rely on any high-tech technology. The feeling of losing one's reliance in an instant was not only uncomfortable, but also more of a panic. Chapter 152. Damn it. There really is a problem with this road, we can't use magic. This voice belonged to a middle-aged woman, who seemed to be a magician. The do-chi in my body has disappeared, what's going on? Is this the second test? A panicked female voice sounded. Although he couldn't see her face, he knew that she was a young female swordmaster. Xiaowu, where are you? Mingxi was still not used to the sudden disappearance of his power. This place really seemed strange. Although he was not used to suddenly becoming a powerless ordinary person, he was more worried about the naive girl who didn't know anything. I'm here. The girl's soft voice sounded. Fengwu's voice always gave people a soft feeling. At this time, the girl's voice was still so calm, as if nothing could make her panic. At the same time Ming-Shi heard the voice, a pair of tender little hands suddenly accurately grabbed his hand. The girl's hands were very soft, and her palms were very small, very different from a man's hands. "Xiao?" Ming-Shi asked with some uncertainty. His palms slightly tightened, wanting to determine if this was Feng Wu's hand. A faint response and the strength of the grasp, all of these proved to Ming-Shi that the owner of this little hand was Feng Wu. "Xiao Wu, I'm your big brother Pei Qing." Hearing Feng Wu's voice, Pei Qing accurately found Feng Wu's location. Originally, they were very close, and with the guidance of the voice it was naturally easy to find. "Xiao Wu." This voice was Drew's. In order to prevent getting separated, the four people held hands and firmly held on to the person beside them. Among the others, those who knew each other like Feng Wu and the others, held hands to prevent getting separated. Those who didn't know each other walked along the mountain wall alone. At least they didn't have to worry about finding their way. The cave was very dark and nothing could be seen. Only the sound of water dripping could be heard. In this dark cave, this sound made people feel even more terrified. "Everyone, it's fate that we've all chosen the same path. Let's say something. Don't you think it's scary to not hear anything?" You're right. Let's say something. It's too quiet here. Feels so scary." A young female voice sounded and said impatiently, "What is this trial trying to test? There's nothing but darkness. I really don't know what kind of results we'll get in the end." Another person spoke up. This time it was a young man. "I think they're trying to test our adaptability. Anyway, as long as we follow this path, we'll definitely be able to get out," the second female voice said again. "SK, how could the inheritance test of the divine tomb be so easy?" Judging from the voice, the speaker was obviously a middle-aged man. What the middle-aged man said made sense. If it was just darkness, it wouldn't be able to scare them. This kind of test was really too easy. Although everyone couldn't sense their own strength, there was obviously nothing dangerous in this dark passage. If it was just to make them powerless and have a small black room, this trick might be useful for some new adventurers. For adventurers like them who had been exploring dangerous places all year round, other than the initial shock and discomfort at the beginning, it would make them feel very uncomfortable. The road ahead would only get smoother and smoother. It was impossible for it to pose any substantial threat to them. Feng Wu held Ajur's hand and didn't say anything. Pei Qing and the others didn't say anything either. In this dark environment where they couldn't even see their own fingers, the most worrying thing wasn't the threat from the dark environment, but Ming-Shi held the girl's soft hand. The darkness made it impossible to see the faint blush on his face. This was the first time Ming-Shi held a girl's hand. Due to his special identity, there were too many girls who secretly approached him since he was young. Over time, he didn't like to get close to girls. Even if he was gentle to all the girls in school, he was always very gentle to them. Only a few of his close friends knew that he didn't like women to get close to him. His identity was destined to attract countless girls to throw themselves at him, so he always had a distant attitude towards women. If Arguros and the others knew that he actually took the initiative to hold a girl's hand, they wouldn't believe it. Ming-Shi laughed self-deprecatingly. The soft touch in his hand was very unfamiliar to him, but he didn't dislike it. Ming-Shi couldn't help but smile. Even if he knew that he couldn't see anything, he couldn't help but look in the girl's direction. He didn't dislike this girl who always proposed to him. Feng Wu was also a little happy. Mo Gue told her that if they wanted to become a couple, they had to start by holding hands. Now that they were holding hands, did it mean that they could become a couple soon? Feng Wu's happy heart was interrupted by a scream. Ah! A person let out a mournful scream, and then the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground. What's going on? Is someone being attacked? Fuck. I knew that this damn place couldn't be so peaceful. If it was just testing us with darkness and losing our abilities, then that's child's play. There really is something else. Who did it? What the hell is going on? More and more people spoke, their voices filled with panic and fear. It was said that there was great fear between life and death. Now they were walking in darkness and had lost all their abilities. An unknown object was killing people. Anyone would panic and be afraid, and this kind of panic and fear would lead them to a more dangerous situation. In the dark tunnel, everyone was on guard. An unknown object was attacking them. How could they not be afraid? Ah! Another scream rang out. In this dark tunnel it was ear-piercing and eerie. After this scream, a few people suddenly rushed forward along the tunnel. Although they had lost their abilities, they still had strong bodies from years of training. Even if they didn't have strong bodies, they still tried their best to run to the front. Fengwu and the other three were among those who rushed to the front. After the scream rang out again, they didn't stay there. Instead, they immediately ran forward. Clearly, there were many people who had the same idea as them. How many people who could train in the two-realm battlefield were idiots? In the situation just now, there were undoubtedly two possibilities. One was that something was really attacking them, and the other was that one of the 20 people had made a move. Chapter 153. The second possibility was more likely than the first. There was only one inheritance in the Divine Tomb, and only 10 people could enter the last level. There were two ways to enter the last level. The first was to walk faster than everyone else and stand in front of everyone with their strength. The second was to kill the competitors and increase their chances of success. In this pitch-black space, wasn't it the best opportunity to kill one's opponent? Not many people thought of this. Those who thought of it were experienced and powerful adventurers. Don't make a sound. Mingxi wrote on Fengwu's palm with his finger. Fengwu obediently copied Mingxi and wrote a word on Mingxi's palm with her finger. Okay. Mingxi nodded secretly. This was good. It was pitch black now. As long as they didn't make a sound, it wouldn't be easy for that person to succeed. However, the most important thing now was to get rid of the others. It was too dangerous to walk with others. In the dark passage, there were no more voices, and even the sound of footsteps was almost inaudible. It seemed that everyone had restrained their auras and footsteps, not wanting to be the next target of the person who secretly made a move. Mingxi's group of 4 held hands and sped up. In this pitch-black environment, the risk factor was too high. It was best to leave as soon as possible. Finally, they found a glimmer of light not far ahead. Seeing this glimmer of light, everyone's spirits were lifted. Great, they could finally get out. Pei Qing and Drew were especially excited. The feeling of rushing along hand in hand wasn't very good. Now they could finally get out. Oh yeah. With the guidance of the light, everyone sped up immediately. The others who had been walking not far from Fengwu's group rushed to the exit at full speed. They all remembered that there were only 10 spots. If they didn't hurry, the spots would definitely be snatched up by others. Xiaowu, let's go too. Don't let these guys snatch up all the spots. Pei Qing said and wanted to break free from Fengwu's hand. Now, Fengwu's left hand was holding Mingxi, and her right hand was holding Pei Qing. The boys consciously protected Fengwu, the only female. As they spoke, many people who had fallen behind rushed forward. No one wanted to fall behind others at this time. Don't go, it's dangerous. Fengwu grabbed Pei Qing's hand and said with a serious face. Although Pei Qing couldn't see her expression, he could hear the girl's seriousness in her voice. Pei Qing stood obediently and didn't fight for the spot with that person. Drew's life was saved by Fengwu, and with the Fengwu girl's help on the grasslands, he naturally wouldn't doubt Fengwu's words. He stood there obediently holding Pei Qing's hand and didn't rush forward. Xiaowu, do you know what danger lies ahead? Pei Qing asked curiously. I don't know. That place gives me a very bad feeling. Fengwu said honestly. Perhaps it was because Fengwu's heart was as pure and flawless as her sword, so she was always able to detect things with a bad aura rather quickly. I don't know if there's really an exit in front. Xiaowu, do you know? Drew asked casually. He didn't think that Fengwu would answer this question. No matter how powerful Fengwu was, she had never entered the cave. How could she know the situation inside? There's no exit. There's only a magical beast, and it's a very powerful magical beast. Mingxi suddenly said. You know. Pei Qing was surprised and asked. Even Fengwu could only discover that there was danger in the cave, but Mingxi even knew what was inside. This was too inconceivable. Well, I smell a magical beast. The closer I get to the cave, the stronger the smell. Mingxi secretly frowned as he looked at the cave. He had a bad feeling. The magical beast in the cave gave him a very bad feeling. That feeling didn't come from an ordinary magical beast, but more like a vicious beast. Of course, he didn't say this out loud. If he let them know that there was a vicious beast in the cave, he was afraid that they would be even more uneasy. The so-called vicious beast was also a type of magical beast. They were born cruel and bloodthirsty. There was only killing in their hearts. It was a type of magical beast that wasn't terrifying. Well, Senior Ming, she is right. Feng Wu's voice sounded. Her voice was still so soft, like soft cotton candy. Feng Wu also had something she didn't say. She felt that the magical beast had a very bad aura. Feng Wu girl had always been an animal lover. She liked many small animals, but now she didn't like the unknown magical beast not far away. She always felt that the magical beast wouldn't like her. What do we do now? Aren't we going in? Drew asked. Let's go this way. Mingxi took the lead in front and led the four to another road. It turned out that this was actually a fork in the road. In the darkness there was no way to see the road, but Mingxi could see that there was a fork in the road. As expected of the fifth-year chief student of Notre Dame du Starlight, Pei Qing and Drew thought with some admiration. At the same time they also thought about when they could become so powerful that they could find the way even if they couldn't see. How did you find out that there was a road here? Pei Qing asked curiously. It's the sound of the wind. The sound of the wind came from this road. It proves that there is still a road here. Mingxi explained lightly. Pei Qing finally understood and didn't ask the reason. If he heard the sound of the wind, please forgive him for not being able to hear anything now that his ability had disappeared. The four of them walked together hand in hand. At this time in the Shining Cave there was a big battle. The few people who entered the cave first were either dead or injured. There were clearly 20 people who entered this road, but now there were only 12 people left. 8 people had died on this road. No one would have thought that one of the 4 great ferocious beasts, the sky-devouring wolf, lived in this cave with light. As one of the 4 great ferocious beasts, the sky-devouring wolf's ability was needless to say. Everyone on the continent knew that the sky-devouring wolf, one of the 4 great ferocious beasts, only had the instinct to devour things since birth. There was a sky-devouring wolf in the Book of Beasts that directly swallowed all the people and things in a small country. Although the Star Hall sent people to execute the sky-devouring wolf on the spot, the lives that were lost could no longer be recovered. Since then, the sky-devouring wolf's name could be said to be the fiercest in the continent. Other than the other 3 great ferocious beasts and divine beasts, there was really no other beast that could compare to the sky-devouring wolf. Damn it, get out of here quickly. A middle-aged swordsman raised his sword and roared. The sky-devouring demonic wolf wasn't stupid. How could it let the prey in its mouth escape just like that? After entering this cave, everyone had to be its food. Chapter 154. After being locked up in this place for so many years, it hadn't had a good meal in a long time. Now that a group of people came in to die, it would be a waste if it didn't devour them. The sky-devouring wolf looked at the group of people entering the cave as if it was looking at food. Other than Feng Wu's group of 4, there were still 8 people alive in the cave. Those who were able to survive until now were all top experts. Even if the 8 of them gathered together, they still wouldn't have the confidence to deal with the sky-devouring wolf. The sky-devouring wolf's ferocious reputation was too well known. Facing such a ferocious beast, anyone would have to admit defeat. Think of a way to leave this cave. The sky-devouring wolf has been restrained. As long as we leave this cave we will be safe. A female magus said. Everyone nodded. The human side and the beast side faced each other with a small distance between them. This standoff didn't last long. A male magus pushed the female magus who was standing in front of him out of the cave. When the beast was distracted, the rest of them reacted quickly and fled to the entrance. Since entering the cave, everyone's strength had recovered to its peak. With the support of magic and Do Qi, they were able to survive for so long under the sky-devouring wolf's claws. If not for that, they would have already died in the mouth of the sky-devouring wolf. The magus who pushed the female magus was the 6th elder of the Lianya clan, Shiat. Shiat was a dark magus. He was born a dark magus. According to legends, dark magi were rarer than light magi. The reason why Shiat chose this path was because he was a dark magus. Not only was he not afraid of darkness, he was also very fond of it. What Shiat didn't expect was that after entering this cave, he would lose his strength and almost get killed. This was already humiliating enough for Shiat. He didn't expect his luck to be so bad. He originally thought that he had found the exit, but he didn't expect that not only was it not the exit, but there was also a man-eating beast living here. Fortunately, Shiat was already a great magus. After recovering his strength, he began to think of a way to escape. Although he was a great magus, he didn't have any advantage in front of this beast. Fortunately, his strength was not weak, and he quickly thought of a good idea. Because of this, he pushed the female magician out. As long as one of them attracted the attention of the ferocious beast, he could escape. What Shiat didn't expect was that the other 6 people's reactions weren't slow either. Shiat quickly got up and dashed towards the cave entrance. The devourer wolf was a beast blessed by the heavens, and its intelligence was already comparable to a human's. Naturally, it did not fall for Shiat's trick. Its huge wolf body stood in the cave, and its black fur actually had a trace of red light. This was the phenomenon of condensing magic power. Sure enough, after one breath, a huge energy ball shot out from Skywolf's mouth and hit the entrance of the cave. Because of the attack of the energy ball, the people running at the front had no choice but to dodge. If they didn't dodge and were hit, even if they didn't die, they would be half dead. Damn it! A male swordsman cursed and took out an item from his space ring. It was actually a teleportation scroll. This was a short-distance teleportation scroll. Even if they were teleported out, they would still be on the same path. The swordsman tried to use his doqi to activate the scroll, but who would have thought that it would be useless? The scroll didn't show any signs of activation. It can't be activated. The swordsman cursed, and the other people's faces also turned ugly. No one wanted to die here. If they couldn't use the teleportation scroll, then they would lose their only hope of survival. This made the other 7 people's faces turn ugly. The female magician who was plotted against didn't die. The devourer wolf didn't care about her at all. Instead, it stared at the 7 people who were trying to escape. With the intelligence of the devourer wolf, it naturally wouldn't do something as stupid as giving up 7 pieces of meat for a piece of meat. Yes, in the eyes of the devourer wolf, everything in front of it was delicious meat. They were nothing but food for the devourer wolf, nothing more. No matter how much the food resisted, it was impossible for them to escape the fate of being eaten. The devourer wolf was very confident in its own strength. Although it had been imprisoned in this place for tens of thousands of years by a damned fellow, and its strength had been stagnant at the moment it was imprisoned, so what? Before it was imprisoned here, it was already a powerful magical beast among magical beasts. It was completely confident that it could make all of these humans enter its stomach. The devourer wolf eyed its food covetously. Feng Wu and the other 3 people walked along the path in the dark. The further they walked, the more mysterious the path became. At first they couldn't see anything. Later on they couldn't even hear anything. Finally they even lost their senses. There was no sight, no hearing, no touch. Walking on this path, they were holding each other's hands, but they couldn't feel each other's presence. Was there anything more terrifying than this? The 4 of them couldn't do anything. The only thing they could do was to keep moving forward. Only by leaving this place could they return to normal. The long dark path continued. At the same time, on the other red path, it wasn't peaceful either. There was fire everywhere. Walking on this path was like walking on lava. The temperature was getting higher and higher. Many of the weaker people just spontaneously combusted and turned into ashes. Only 10 people were left in the team of 20, including Ajur, Elena, Ruglas, and the siblings Tingfeng and Tingyu. The brother and sister were the weakest among them, but they were both members of the expert team. As the team leader, Ajur naturally took good care of them, which was why the brother and sister were able to survive to this day. On the other ice and snow road, the situation was similar to this one. The whole passage had been frozen, and from time to time, there would be cold winds blowing. On this frozen passage, the ice and snow underground would occasionally turn into magic beasts to attack them. The further they went, the stronger the magic beasts attacking them. Rika and Eve both suffered minor injuries, while the others were still fine. Because they were strong enough, they didn't suffer any injuries. The dark path seemed to have no end. Feng Wu couldn't sense the people around her. She could only keep walking forward. Fortunately, Feng Wu was a simple-minded person. In the mouth of her dantian, there was Xiaochun who lived and chatted with her. After completely losing her sense of hearing and touch, Xiaochun had already contacted Fengwu. Fengwu knew from Xiaochun that if she could successfully complete this path, her strength would increase greatly. If she couldn't complete it, she would be stuck on this path forever. She might even go crazy. Chapter 155. Those who had never been locked up in a small dark room would never know how terrifying it was. When a person lost all their senses and was locked up in a dark passage, they would feel as if they were the only one left in the world. At that time, it would be amazing if they didn't go crazy. After walking for who knew how long, they finally saw light ahead. It was an entrance to a cave. Fengwu instinctively walked toward the light. She could not sense the others, so she did not know whether they were beside her or not. She only knew that they would meet at the end. Mingxi walked into the cave with a pale face. He realized that the cave was filled with light, and the elemental energy was very thick. After everything that he had just experienced, even if he was extraordinarily intelligent, he had almost been trapped in the eternal darkness, unable to escape. Other people did not know the history of this dark tunnel, but Mingxi, after losing his sense of sight, hearing, smell, and touch, remembered this dark tunnel. This passageway had appeared in the ancient times of Yao Yuan. Although it was unknown who had originally created this passageway, it was famous for its fearsomeness during the ancient times. It was said that in ancient times, there were humans who cultivated to the level of gods. For the development of the human race, most of the gods would leave their inheritances on this land, hoping that more humans could become gods and strengthen the power of the human race. And in the places where the postnatal gods left behind their legacies, there would often be such a dark corridor. This corridor was called the Nightmare Corridor. To the humans of that time, the trials of the Nightmare Corridor were like nightmares. Once humans entered this tunnel, they would lose all sense of the outside world. They could not see, hear, smell, or feel anything. And that was not the scariest part. If you felt fear in the center of this tunnel, then your fear would be magnified infinitely. Any emotion would be magnified many times over. Those with a lower tolerance would go insane before they could even walk out, and most would die in the nightmare tunnel. Now Mingxi was sure that this tunnel was created based on the principles of the nightmare tunnel. With great risks came great rewards. Those who successfully walked out of the nightmare tunnel without their minds being affected would have their state of mind improved by more than one level. When the time came, it would be extremely helpful in raising one's strength. In ancient times, most of the famous peerless experts had passed through the nightmare corridor. As long as they weren't unlucky enough to die before they became strong enough, they would all become peerless experts in the future. There were even many who ascended to the celestial realm. From the ancient times until now, tens of thousands of years had passed. This nightmare tunnel had disappeared in the long river of history after God chose death. He did not expect to see this famous nightmare tunnel again today. After successfully walking out of the nightmare tunnel, he discovered that there was no one else in the cave. He knew that other than himself, no one else had come out. In this cave, there was nothing but a slightly smaller hole. It seemed that the exit was in that small hole. Mingxi looked at the hole and did not immediately move forward. Instead, he sat down on the ground and closed his eyes to cultivate his doqi and magic. Few people knew that Mingxi was a peerless expert who cultivated both magic and martial arts. Because of his bloodline, he inherited the power of his ancestors from the moment he was born. In the Notre Dame du Starlight, there were not many people who could be his teachers in magic other than the two deans. Therefore, when he entered the Notre Dame du Starlight, he directly joined the swordmaster department. To him, learning the sword in the Sacred Institute was much more useful. Normally, when he faced enemies, he would use the sword most of the time. Only on rare occasions would he use magic. Time ticked by, but Mingxi was still sitting there motionless. Only when he heard light footsteps entering the cave did he slowly open his eyes. There seemed to be a golden light flashing in his eyes, making him look incomparably mysterious. Senior Mingxi. As soon as Fengwu entered the cave, she saw Mingxi sitting there cultivating. Her heart was filled with joy. She opened her eyes wide and walked over to Mingxi. Mingxi stood up and looked at the young girl walking towards him. Her expression was normal, but because it was so normal, it gave Mingxi a strange feeling. Even though the corridor of nightmares would not actively attack, it was able to crush a person's mental fortitude. Even with his mental fortitude, it was extremely dangerous to pass this stage. The endless darkness and loneliness was not something that anyone could withstand. Even a grown man like him could not endure it. Who would have thought that such a petite girl like Feng Wu could do it without flinching? It was simply inconceivable. Xiao Wu, are you all right? Although Feng Wu looked much better than when he came out, he still couldn't help but ask worriedly. Feng Wu obediently shook her head. I'm fine. It's good that you're fine. Sit down and recover. We'll wait for Pei Qing and Drew. Mingxi said gently as he rubbed the Feng Wu girl's head. Feng Wu nodded and obediently sat down to cultivate. Mingxi sat beside Feng Wu and watched quietly. Although he did not know how strong Feng Wu was, Feng Wu always gave him a very strong feeling. Now that he watched Feng Wu cultivate, this feeling only grew stronger. With the cultivation of Do Qi, he could feel that Feng Wu's body was forming a powerful force. This force did not seem to be as simple as Do Qi. It seemed that the method she used to cultivate Do Qi was somewhat special. Currently on the continent, the method of cultivating Do Qi was the same. Only the sword arts were different. Every family had their own secret techniques. The difference in sword arts, the speed of cultivating Do Qi, and the strength of the sword arts were the main factors that determined whether a swordmaster was strong or not. He knew a bit about Feng Wu's sword arts. Feng Wu seemed to cultivate a very strong sword art. Among her peers there were few who could match her. But the method of cultivating Do Qi was the reason why he was most surprised. What kind of method was this? Why did this method of cultivating Do Qi feel more powerful than the normal method of cultivating Do Qi? Although Mingxi was somewhat curious, he did not intend to ask. Everyone had their own secrets. He himself already had enough. It was something that many people could not catch up with in their lifetime. If he coveted other people's secrets, then he really was not satisfied. After half a quarter of an hour, Feng Wu stopped cultivating. Opening her eyes, she found that Mingxi was staring at her thoughtfully. If it was an ordinary girl being stared at by the boy she liked like this, she would have already blushed. Chapter 156. Feng Wu wasn't an ordinary girl. This girl didn't know what it meant to be shy. When she saw Mingxi looking at her, she also looked back at Mingxi. Her pair of big eyes stared at him without blinking, making Mingxi feel embarrassed. Xiao Wu, in the future in front of outsiders, you can't reveal your Do Qi cultivation method. Do you understand? Mingxi was somewhat worried, so he immediately warned her. Feng Wu nodded her small head, very cutely looking at him with her big eyes. Although there was a faint doubt on her small face, she didn't open her mouth to ask why he wanted her to do this. That pure and lovely appearance made Mingxi's heart flash with a trace of strangeness. To tell the truth, he had seen many women. Some were bold and straightforward. Some were lively and lovely. Some were gentle and graceful. And some were kind and beautiful. All of these girls were beautiful. Of course, there were also some women they carried a very heavy selfish desire. These women were beautiful, but they were beautiful with poisonous thorns. Mingxi had always kept a respectful distance from this kind of woman. He had seen many beautiful and kind women, or vicious and beautiful women, but it was the first time he had seen such a pure and simple woman like Feng Wu. From the first time they met at the hot spring, it seemed that something was quietly changing. He didn't deny that he had a good impression of this pure and beautiful girl, but right now the good impression hadn't risen to the level of love. Whether or not she would fall in love with him in the future he didn't know. So he just let nature take its course. Besides, he also didn't think that Feng Wu really liked him. Even if Feng Wu had already proposed to him, in the eyes of this girl, he couldn't see the love of a lover, nor could he see the shyness of a young girl. Did this pure and simple girl really know what love was? Mingxi really doubted this point. Sighing in his heart, Mingxi rubbed Feng Wu's hair, took out a handkerchief from his body, and bit his finger, using it to write 2 sentences. The main meaning of these 2 sentences was that he left with Feng Wu first. When Pei Qing and Drew came out, they could leave immediately without waiting for them. Leaving the handkerchief in a conspicuous place, he led Feng Wu towards the innermost and smaller cave entrance. Feng Wu saw Mingxi write some words on the handkerchief with blood. She also saw clearly what was written on it. Without saying a word, she followed Mingxi into the smaller cave. Inside the innermost cave was a completely different world. There was a strange little tree growing inside. On the tree was a fruit that was flashing with 7-colored light. The whole tree only had one fruit, and it looked very extraordinary. Next to the fruit tree was a spring. The spring water was rich in life essence. Just by being close to the lake, one could feel their spirit being shaken. In the entire cave, apart from the spring and the mysterious fruit tree, there was nothing else. This cave was actually a dead end. There was no way out. Seeing no way out, Mingxi frowned slightly. Then he began to size up the surrounding environment. There was definitely a way out of this cave, but he didn't know where it was. After carefully looking at every inch of the surrounding ground and stone walls, Mingxi found that the most suspicious things in this cave were the fruit tree and the spring. Mingxi began to carefully size up the fruit tree. The more he looked, the more he found that this little tree looked very similar to a spiritual object he had seen in an ancient book. If it was really that thing, although he couldn't use it, it was the best thing for Xiao Wu. However, that thing wasn't easy to obtain. If it was really as he thought, then there would be a fierce battle to fight. Mingxi pulled Fengwu's hand and wanted to retreat. He wanted to take Fengwu away first, and then he planned to fight alone. If he wanted to obtain that legendary spiritual object, there was only one way, and that was to defeat it and erase its consciousness. Mingxi wanted to take Fengwu to a safe distance, but Fengwu didn't. Since entering this cave, Fengwu focused her attention on the fruit tree in front of her. She found that the fruit on the tree was very strange. After discovering that someone had entered, it seemed to move shyly, as if it wanted to hide itself. Unfortunately, the tree was too small and couldn't block it at all. Fengwu found that the fruit was secretly looking at her and Senior Mingxi from time to time. After glancing at them, it quietly hid behind the leaves, although the leaves really couldn't cover anything. Xiao! Mingxi turned his head in puzzlement. Fengwu broke free from Mingxi's hand and wanted to go forward to see that shy fruit. She felt that it was a shy little guy. Don't go up, it's too dangerous. Mingxi hurriedly pulled Fengwu back. His heart almost stopped from fright. Did this little girl know what that thing was? It was a famous fierce creature in ancient times. If it wasn't for his special bloodline, he wouldn't dare to challenge that fierce creature before he fully grew up. It's not dangerous. Fengwu really looked at Mingxi and said. But that thing is. Mingxi was about to explain what it was, but an unexpected situation happened. An ancient sword flew out from Fengwu's dantian. The sword flew directly to the fruit with a domineering aura. Then the sword flashed, and a big mouth formed by magic power directly swallowed the fruit into its stomach. Then the fruit disappeared, and the spring dried up. The ancient sword seemed to be drunk. It burped, and then flew back to Fengwu's dantian. Wasn't it supposed to be a tough battle? Mingxi was a little confused. That was a fierce all-element spirit that grew up by absorbing the blood of gods and demons. In Mingxi's memories, there was a record of that fruit in an ancient book. That fruit was called elemental spirit, or rather, it was not a fruit at all. It was just something that had taken on the appearance of a fruit. Elemental spirits were only born in places where magic elements were the most abundant, and only elemental spirits of one type of magic were born. Every elemental spirit had strong combat power and was very fierce. When they saw something enter their territory, whether it was a human or a magical beast, they would directly kill it, and then absorb the energy of the other party and turn it into their own nourishment. Although elemental spirits had always been fierce, they did represent a great opportunity for humans. No matter who it was, as long as they had an elemental spirit that matched their attribute, even if their aptitude was poor, they could rely on the power of the elemental spirit to become a peerless master. Even if they couldn't become a god, it was absolutely not a problem for them to transcend mortality. Elemental spirits originally only had one type of magic attribute, but there was a situation where a single elemental spirit could evolve into an all-element spirit. That was to absorb the blood of gods and demons as nourishment, and the blood of gods and demons they absorbed was not just a little bit. Moreover, the speed of their evolution was extremely slow. During their evolution, if they were unlucky and were disturbed by others, the evolution would fail. Chapter 157. From this, one could see how rare an all-element fairy was. In the entire history of the continent, an all-element fairy had only appeared once, and it had been subdued by the most talented magician in the continent, Longza Gamer. In the end, both of them had ascended to the divine realm, and now there was actually an all-element spirit in front of him. No matter how he thought about it, it felt a little surreal. What was even more surreal was that the legendary all-element spirit with off-the-charts combat power was actually eaten by a sword right in front of him. Who could tell him how a sword could eat an elemental fairy? If Mingxi had been born in the modern world, he would have screamed at the sky. This was illogical. Reality told him that even illogical things could happen, so he had to be calm. Compared to Mingxi's shock, Fengwu's emotions were much simpler. She was worried that the shy little fruit had really been eaten by Xiaochun. After communicating with Xiaochun through telepathy, Fengwu was relieved to know that little fruit was still alive and well. Because of the disappearance of the elemental fairy, the small tree and spring that had originally existed because of the elemental fairy's growth had also disappeared. After the spring water disappeared, a long flight of stairs was discovered at the bottom of the spring. It seemed that this was the path to the final stage. Drew and Pei Qing still hadn't appeared, and they didn't know how long it would take for the two of them to arrive. If they couldn't come out, then it would be too dangerous. Once one entered the nightmare corridor, they would have to come out on their own. Of course, there was another way to bring people out, and that was to find a successor. When that time came, everyone who failed would be teleported out. Other than the successor, no one else would be able to stay in this place. Mingxi knew that there was no point in waiting any longer. If they came out later, they would naturally find a way to follow. If they couldn't come out, then he could only hope that someone would inherit this legacy as soon as possible. That way, Pei Qing and the others would also be teleported out. As for him and Fengwu, even if they waited here, they would not be of any help to the two of them. Rather than waiting here and doing useless work, they might as well continue moving forward. After making the decision, Mingxi and Fengwu walked down the long black staircase one after the other. Fortunately, both of them had recovered their abilities. Mingxi was also a rare dual cultivator of magic and martial arts. It was simply too easy for him to create a light ball to illuminate the area. The long staircase seemed to have no end. Mingxi pulled Fengwu's hand and carefully stood in front, protecting Fengwu behind him. The stairs were already covered with a thick layer of dust. If one was not careful, they would step on some bones of the dead. These bones naturally did not belong to the divine bone. These were the bones of magical beasts and human corpses that were implicated in this battle. Carefully avoiding the bones on the ground, Mingxi looked back at Fengwu worriedly. Only when he saw that the Fengwu girl's complexion was normal did he relax. In Mingxi's knowledge, other than a tomboy like Elena, any girl would be frightened when they saw so many corpses. Naturally, he was worried that Fengwu would be frightened as well. Only when he saw that Fengwu's complexion was normal did he realize that he was worried for nothing. Unexpectedly, this staircase looked very long. He did not expect that they would finish walking after 20 minutes. After walking down the stairs, a large bronze door appeared in front of them. The door was pitch black and there were no pictures on it. However, it gave off a gloomy and terrifying feeling. Intuitively, Fengwu did not like what was behind the door. Mingxi secretly frowned. His eyes flashed, then returned to normal. He tried to push the door. The bronze door, which was supposed to be extremely heavy, was pushed open just like that. Fengwu's eyes lit up. Senior Ming, she is so amazing. Even she did not have the strength to say that. After being praised, Mingxi looked back at Fengwu with some embarrassment. It's not that I'm amazing. It's just that this door looks heavy, but it's actually not heavy. Mingxi said this not to be modest or anything. He really did think that the door was not heavy. It was a far cry from its appearance. The door opened with a creak, and another large hall appeared in front of Mingxi and Fengwu. Mingxi pulled Fengwu into the large bronze door. There were already 5 people standing in the large hall. Among these 5 people, most of them were people that Fengwu and the others were familiar with. There was a Zhi, Ziqing, and Irene. The 3 of them had passed the second round and appeared here. The other 2 people who appeared were the Idori family's 7th elder, Farley. The other was the Inferno Mercenary Group's 3rd squad leader, Cohen. When Farley saw Mingxi and Fengwu appear in the large hall, he only glanced at them once before moving his gaze away. However, Cohen clearly recognized Mingxi and Fengwu. He nodded at them before moving his gaze away. When a Zhi saw Fengwu, he naturally ran over immediately. "Xiaowu, you're not hurt, are you?" As he spoke, he rubbed the girl's head. The girl seemed to be in good spirits, so there shouldn't be any injuries. Feeling that she hadn't seen a Zhi for a long time, Fengwu was a little happy. Her eyes curved as she asked, I'm fine. How about you? What could have happened to me? I'm so strong, who can hurt me? He said in an insufferably loud voice. When he spoke, his red eyebrows were raised, and he completely ignored the people around him. Senior Mingxi, Senior Skycliff said that he's not interested in magic inheritances, so he won't be coming. Senior Arguros also said that he won't be coming. Irene followed behind Ajur and walked in front of Mingxi and Fengwu. She then passed on Skycliff and the others' original words. Ziqing and Irene could understand why Skycliff didn't want to enter this stage. He was a swordsman, so what was the point of coming to the final stage? Even if he really passed, he wouldn't be able to inherit any magic inheritances. However, the two of them couldn't understand Arguros. Skycliff didn't want to compete because he was a swordsman. You're a magician, so you don't even know how to fight for a great opportunity placed in front of you. Although they couldn't understand, Ruglaz's withdrawal still made the two of them happy. One less strong opponent would be very beneficial for inheriting a god's magic inheritance in the future. Ziqing and Irene couldn't understand why Arguros didn't try hard to compete for the inheritance. But Mingxi knew that it was all because Arguros' ancestor had a god. Moreover, the god had left behind the inheritance in their family's ancestral land. As a direct descendant of the family, Arguros had already gone to the ancestral land to obtain the inheritance. Since he already had a god's inheritance, he naturally wouldn't be that interested in other inheritances. As for what he obtained himself, it was completely meaningless to him. Chapter 158. Of course, Mingxi wouldn't tell them this, so he'd let them guess on their own. I understand. Mingxi smiled slightly, still as gentle and courteous as ever. Irene's heart trembled. What a disaster! Even though she'd seen countless handsome men in her previous life, she'd never seen a single one that could compare to Mingxi. How did this person grow up to be so beautiful? Ziqing was also a bit shaken. Fortunately, she'd always been a strong-willed person, so she wasn't affected for too long before she returned to normal. Only a faint blush remained on her face. Ajur didn't pay attention to the changes in the two girls beside him. He only looked at Mingxi and said, Senior Elena wasn't injured at the last stage, so she can't come. Ruglaz is taking care of Elena, so Senior isn't coming either. Tingfeng and Tingyu are both swordmasters, so they aren't coming either. Elena was injured? Is it serious? Mingxi asked with concern. Elena was like an older sister to the boys, so they were naturally worried when they heard that she was injured. It's alright, it's not too serious. More than 50% of her body was burned. Ajur said nonchalantly. Ziqing and Irene looked at Ajur with wistful eyes. Half of her body was burned, and you said it wasn't too serious? Then what kind of injury would be considered serious in your heart? Holy shit! Fengwu was a bit worried when she heard that Elena was injured, and that her injuries weren't light. Is Senior Elena really alright? Fengwu bit her lip. She quite liked this senior of hers, Elena, and didn't want her to be injured at all. Don't worry. Although she has many burns on her body and can't see anyone now, as long as she leaves this place, any light magician or a bottle of healing potion will be able to heal her wounds. When the time comes, I guarantee that not even a scar will be left behind. Ajur said confidently as he stroked the Fengwu girl's head. Fengwu was relieved. She believed that Ajur definitely wouldn't lie to her, so she relaxed quite a bit. She took out a big bun from her interspatial ring and began munching on it. When she was in the nightmare corridor earlier, due to the restriction on her powers, she couldn't retrieve anything from her spatial ring. Now that she had finally recovered her powers, she naturally wanted to eat to her heart's content. Fengwu opened her small red mouth and took a few bites of the thin skin bun. The fragrance of the meat filling immediately spread throughout the hall. This fragrance was very alluring, causing everyone's stomach to move. Even Mingxi suddenly felt a little hungry. As for Ziqing and Irene, these two women naturally brought with them food that was even better than Fengwu's bun. The two girls took out good wine and dishes from their interspatial rings. The dishes included roast chicken, sliced duck, fried pork chops, potato cakes, and delicacies. When these dishes were laid out, Fengwu's eyes were glued to them. The words "want to eat" were written all over her face. Everyone, let's eat together. We don't know what kind of test awaits us later. Let's eat first so that we have the strength to face the test. Zicheng's smile was gentle and beautiful. That's right. Everyone, let's eat together. I made this roast chicken and fried pork chops myself. My cooking skills may not be as good as Zicheng's, but Senior Ming Shi, Xiao Wu and Ajur, if they don't taste good, please tell me directly. I'm quite a person who can take a blow. After saying this, she stuck out her tongue cutely. This action of sticking out her tongue was done wittily and cutely. It faintly revealed a seductive charm. Unfortunately, the two men in front of her were not very interested in women. The other had seen too many beautiful women, and had already developed an extraordinary immunity. Neither of them would be interested in Irene. Irene, you're too modest. The dishes you make smell very good. The taste will definitely not be bad. Zicheng modestly praised Irene's cooking skills. With so many delicious dishes laid out, Feng Wu and the others naturally did not stand on ceremony. After a long period of mental strain and fighting, Ajur was already hungry. He also had some food in his interspatial ring, but it was all buns, chicken legs, duck legs and barbecued meat. It was not as sumptuous as the dishes laid out by Zicheng and Irene. Mingxi did not stand on ceremony. The few of them found a place to sit on and began to eat heartily. At this time, Cohen and Farley, who were not far from Feng Wu and the others, were a little hungry from the aroma of the food in the room. Farley was fine. In his heart, nothing was more important than the inheritance of a god. He did not care about food. He only took a glance and turned his gaze away. His whole attention was on the great hall. Cohen, on the other hand, was holding a roasted chicken and a bottle of ale. He sat alone in a corner and ate with big mouthfuls. Although the dishes were not as sumptuous as those of Feng Wu and the others, he still ate to his heart's content. As the few of them were eating, a bronze door suddenly appeared in the middle of the great hall. Then an old man and a girl appeared. The girl was about the same age as Feng Wu. She looked smart and cute, but her eyes seemed to have a natural charm that made people want to lose themselves in them. The old man looked very old, but his spirit and appearance were not bad. No one dared to look down on this old man and young girl. Being able to come here was a proof of one's strength. The old man and the young girl only glanced at the 7 people present. Their eyes paused on Feng Wu and the others for a while before moving away. The young girl helped the old man find a place to sit down. The old man and the young girl just sat there quietly, not saying a word. After the old man and the young girl arrived, another quarter of an hour passed before the last person came. This person was the Inferno Mercenary Group's 3rd Squad's Vice Captain Mirian. Mirian had always been a low-key person in the 3rd Squad. Under normal circumstances, he would not make a move. But if he did, perhaps even the captain Cohen would not be his opponent. Mirian was a magician, a metal magician. Moreover, his magic level was not lower than that of the Idori family's 7th elder, Farley. Both of them were in the realm of great magicians. It was just that Farley was famous, while Mirian had always been low-key. He rarely made a move in front of outsiders. When Farley saw that the person who came was Mirian, his expression changed. Mirian was the vice captain of the 3rd Squad of the Inferno Mercenary Group. Farley did not know how strong he was, but this guy was really a magician. Originally, he thought that only Cohen would be his opponent. Moreover, Cohen was a swordsman, so it was impossible for him to compete with him for the inheritance. He was only afraid that Cohen would shamelessly come and make trouble. Now that Mirian had appeared, the situation had changed. Even if he had the strength of a great magician, he would not be able to handle Mirian and Cohen together. The key point was that Cohen was a great swordsman. His strength was not necessarily weaker than a great magician. If Cohen entangled him and allowed Mirian to get the inheritance, it would be very disadvantageous for him. Chapter 159. The 10 people who had passed the second trial had finally arrived. The first to arrive were Feng Wu and Mingxi, Irene, Zicheng, Ajur, Cohen, Abel, Mylane, as well as the grandfather and grandson who had very little presence. 10 people had arrived, which meant that the final inheritance was about to begin. When Miliena appeared, Cohen didn't have time to say anything to Miliena, who had just arrived. At this moment a sudden change occurred. A black copper door appeared in front of everyone. This door was exactly the same as the one that led Fengwu and the others to the main hall. They all knew that this should be the place that led to the final trial. The remaining people would receive the inheritance of God Caven. No one would not want the inheritance of a god. When this door appeared, it meant that the time for everyone to coexist peacefully had passed. Once they stepped through this door, it was very likely that they would become opponents in a life-and-death battle. As the seventh elder of the Adori family, Farley had an unimaginable obsession with strength. Almost as soon as the door appeared, Farley was the first to rush in. Just like the door that appeared at the end of the second trial, this door was easily pushed open. It didn't need much strength to open it directly. Farley walked in as soon as the door opened, followed by Cohen and Mylane. Both of them were high-ranking members of the Inferno mercenary group. In this kind of place they were naturally united. After the two of them went in, the old man who had been silent all this time also brought his granddaughter into the portal. After waiting for everyone to enter, Fengwu and the others went in. After everyone had entered, the teleportation gate disappeared. Only then did Mingxi and the others realize that they had arrived outside the dilapidated palace. They could vaguely see the shadow of the palace's former grandeur. Now there were only broken tiles, broken walls, collapsed stone pillars, and other things that had been destroyed beyond recognition. The dark sky was like a huge dark beast with its mouth wide open, waiting for its prey to approach. The palace was in shambles, but they could see a door that was still intact. Standing in the same place, they could see that the door was emitting a faint red light. And from the ajar door, they could see that those who had come in before them had already entered the palace. Zicheng and Irene were about to enter the main hall, but they were suddenly blocked by a hand that suddenly stretched out. Senior Mingxi? Zicheng's gentle eyes flashed with a trace of confusion. Irene also looked up at Mingxi in confusion. Ajur also immediately pulled Fengwu behind him and made a defensive posture. Don't go, something is wrong here. Mingxi's gentle voice had a trace of unusual coldness. Zicheng bit her lips and looked at the palace door with some reluctance. As long as she walked in, she would have the opportunity to obtain the inheritance. She just needed to walk a few more steps and she would arrive. She was very conflicted in her heart. For a moment, she didn't know whether she should listen to this senior or not. Irene's reaction was more direct. Don't worry about Senior Mingxi, nothing will happen. If something really happened, how could we not hear anything? Irene smiled and said very calmly. With the memories of her previous life as a foundation, she wasn't worried at all. In her memory, although the process of Zicheng obtaining the divine artifact was thrilling, in the end, obtaining the inheritance was very simple. As long as she reached the final stage, she could directly obtain the inheritance crystal and use her divine sense to receive all the knowledge in the inheritance crystal. Then, she would be able to obtain God Caven's cultivation method. Although it was very strange that a trace of Caven's consciousness had appeared this time, it could also be because there were more people coming. In the book, only the female lead and the people from the Adori family had come to this place. Even Eve and Elena were not brought by the female lead, but because they were too close, she had no choice but to bring them. In a situation where she knew that there was no danger, how could she let go of this god's inheritance? This was a god-ranked inheritance. For someone like her who didn't have the favorability system to exchange favorability for anything, it was simply too tempting. It's very dangerous. The aura inside is very dark. There's something bad inside. Mingxi still shook his head. He didn't want to let this junior sister risk her life. Something that could make him feel danger was definitely not simple. He only hoped that it wasn't as he guessed, otherwise they would be in danger. Senior, you're thinking too much. This used to be the two-realm battlefield. It's normal for there to be dark aura, so Senior, you don't have to worry. I can protect myself. That's settled, I'll go first. While speaking, Irene's body flashed and left Mingxi's reach. She gave Mingxi and the others a reassuring look, then waved her hand and walked towards the door that led to the palace. When Zicheng saw this scene, the struggle in her eyes disappeared. She felt that there was something inside that belonged to her, so she must take it back. No matter what, she would have to let down Senior Mingxi's good intentions. Senior, Mingxi seemed to know what she wanted to say. He just waved his hand helplessly. Go. I know you won't be satisfied if you don't take a look. If you want to go, then go. Mingxi wasn't a saint in the first place. Just now, he wanted to protect these two juniors who were obviously ambitious for the god-level inheritance because they were seniors and juniors from the same school. However, the two of them didn't seem to care about his protection, so he didn't want to be nosy. Senior, I'm sorry. After looking at Mingxi apologetically, Zicheng followed behind Irene and entered the palace. Out of the 10 people who entered the last round, only 3 didn't enter. Mingxi and Ajur carefully protected Fengwu in the middle. They both knew that there might be a big battle later. Fengwu obediently let them protect her in the middle, but her small eyebrows slightly wrinkled. She smelled blood, a very strong smell of blood. There's blood, a lot of blood. Fengwu pulled Mingxi's sleeve, her small red mouth slightly open. Blood. Mingxi knew that Fengwu wouldn't lie. She must have found something. Just like that time at the small hotel, they didn't find anything, but Fengwu saw something that only necromancers could see. In the palace? Mingxi asked. Fengwu nodded, confirming Mingxi's guess. What do we do? Do we go in? Ajur asked hesitantly. At this moment, a voice came from the sky. This voice was no doubt the voice of God Kaven. You 3 little fellows, don't you want to come in and fight for this god's inheritance? Come on, little fellows, the inheritance is inside. Come on in, come on in. Only the 10 of you can determine the person who will inherit the inheritance. Come on in. Everyone is waiting for you. Chapter 160. This voice seemed to have some kind of temptation, making people involuntarily want to listen to this voice. Fengwu's eyes slightly darkened. Intuitively she didn't like this voice, but Ajur's eyes flashed with a trace of confusion, and then he actually lifted one foot, intending to walk into the palace. Fengwu at this time pulled Ajur's hand. Although she didn't know why she did this, intuition told her that this was the time to do it. If not, Ajur would be in danger. Being pulled by Fengwu like this, Ajur immediately came back to his senses. He vaguely thought of what he wanted to do, and immediately he was startled and broke out in a cold sweat. Damn it. I almost capsized in the gutter. Thinking that as an inheritor of the divine seal, he actually almost fell into someone else's trap, and even needed Fengwu to save him. This made him feel bad all over. Obviously he still wanted to protect Fengwu, but he didn't expect that in the end it was Fengwu who saved him. Why did this feeling feel so good? Who are you? Mingxi's eyes were also clear. He and Fengwu were not affected by the voice. His eyes were very calm. This god is the acquired god, Kaven. The voice said again. No, you're not. This kind of trick to confuse people's minds is not a god's method. Only a devil would use this kind of method. Mingxi's tone was very sure. There was not a trace of hesitation in his voice, as if he had already confirmed his guess. Ajur and Fengwu were not surprised after hearing Mingxi's words. Fengwu didn't have any special concept of gods and devils, so she didn't need to care about what she thought. As for Ajur, because he had the divine seal of the upper realm, he was very sensitive to devil aura. Almost at the moment when he entered this place, he had already felt the faint devil aura in the air. This was not an ordinary devil aura. Even in the devil race, it was certainly the level of a superior devil. Even if Ajur himself had inherited the seal of summer of the 4 great divine seals, he still had many things to learn. He simply didn't have the strength to challenge a superior devil. And he had a certain guess of Mingxi's strength. Maybe he had the strength to challenge a superior devil, but in this place Mingxi's strength was limited. It was impossible to use 100% of his strength. This was really going to be an ancient war. Wakakakaka. I didn't think that someone could discover this god's identity. Unfortunately, what can you do to come to this 3rd level? You think you can still walk out? You are really naive and stupid. The voice of the one who called himself Kaven had changed. It had changed from a divine voice filled with a holy aura to a sinister and seductive divine voice. It is indeed a demonic creature, Mingxi said faintly. Didn't you already guessed it? The voice seemed to have a trace of a question. I have several guesses. What I said was only the most likely one. To make it clear, he was just testing the other party just now. He didn't think that this so-called god of heaven Kaven would be so easily tested. He only said a few words, and he admitted it himself. In fact, Mingxi wasn't sure whether the other party was a devil or not. After discovering the abnormality of this place, Mingxi had 2 guesses. First, the master of this place was really god of heaven Kaven. It was just that the trace of consciousness left by Kaven was slowly contaminated by devil aura. This was why this place was contaminated with devil aura. The other guess was that there was no so-called god of heaven Kaven in this place. All of this was a trap set by the devil race in order to lure some magicians and swordmasters into this place, foolishly fooling around. From the looks of it, it should be the second type. This demon should really be a superior demon that had survived the ancient war. It was just that in that war, he had been seriously injured. Moreover, it was the kind of injury that left him with one last breath. In order to preserve his life, he had been sleeping here for tens of thousands of years. Because of the arrival of these people, this demon was awakened. What Mingxi didn't know was that although his guess was mostly correct, there was still a part of the content that he didn't guess. At this moment he didn't know these, he was secretly on guard against this devil who was hiding somewhere. Hateful little thing, you actually dare to provoke this god. The voice seemed to be angry, the voice carrying obvious killing intent, but after a few breaths, he returned to normal. Forget it, this god is too lazy to bother with you little devils. Let me tell you, if you want to leave, come in and kill this god. As long as this god doesn't die, no one can leave this space. Little guys, come quickly, don't make this god wait too long. Kaka kaka. After a burst of wild laughter, the voice completely disappeared from this space. What should we do? Ajur looked at Mingxi. This was the time for the senior to play a role. And only at this time would this guy remember that Mingxi and the others had the identity of his senior. Go in, why don't we go in? Since he wants us to go in so much, then how can we let him down? Mingxi smiled. His smile was as bright as a spring flower, and even a faint fragrance of flowers could be smelled. Fengwu looked at Mingxi with sparkling eyes, once again thinking that Mingxi was really like her master. Her master had said that in the future, if she wanted to find a husband like her master, she would find a husband like her master. She was very obedient, so she must marry Mingxi, who was very similar to her master. The next time she saw her master would definitely praise her for her eyesight when she saw Mingxi. Thinking of this, Fengwu's eyes curved. The little girl was in a very good mood, not at all troubled by the danger she was in. After Mingxi decided to go in, the three of them walked side by side. Fengwu was still protected in the middle. The door was originally ajar, and the three of them entered through the door in succession. The palace was very big, but there was a hint of blood red. The few people who came in before them were standing in front of an old man. That old man looked to be in his twilight years. He was sitting in the innermost part of the hall. In front of him was an inheritance crystal. The inheritance crystal was a commonly used inheritance test on the continent. There were 3 methods of inheritance on the continent. The first was bloodline inheritance. When the bloodline awakened, the brain would automatically inherit all the knowledge that should be learned. Another method was to use the inheritance crystal. The inheritance crystal was a one-time use item. The inheritance within the crystal could only be obtained by one person. When the energy within the crystal was exhausted, the crystal would disappear. The last method of inheritance was of course the inheritance of words and pictures. The knowledge that one wanted to pass on was recorded in words or pictures on a kind of magic paper. That magic paper, even after 10,000 years, would not decay. In the clans and the various big academies, the things that were passed on would be recorded on magic paper. Only the strong who were alone would use the inheritance crystal to pass on. The 7 people in the palace all stared at the inheritance crystal in front of the old man with fiery eyes. That was the inheritance of a god. Once they received the inheritance, there was hope for them to become a god. Chapter 161. The few people who were already mesmerized by the inheritance crystal didn't know that they had fallen into the devil's trap. They were all looking at the crystal with red eyes and thinking about how to beat the others to obtain the final inheritance. Among the 7 people, only Irene thought a little more. Irene had read the original work, and this old man didn't appear in the original work. The inheritance crystal was clearly placed in the inheritance hall. After Zicheng entered the inheritance hall, he only spent a little time and some small tests to obtain the inheritance. But why would such a strange old man appear now? Is he God Kaven? If it was really him, then why didn't this old man appear in the original work from beginning to end? Irene's heart was filled with questions. She began to wonder if it was because of Un's rebirth, which caused such a big change in the plot. But could this person really be the owner of the inheritance, Kaven? Thinking back to the original work, after Zicheng obtained the inheritance crystal, the book described Kaven. She felt more and more strange, and the doubts in her heart became heavier and heavier. No, Kaven shouldn't be like this. In the original work, Caven was a cultivation maniac. Moreover, he was tall and wasn't handsome. It could be said that he was a very ordinary person. Before he became a god, he wasn't a conspicuous existence in the human world. He was just a 10,000-year-old otaku. Now looking at the old man in front of her, although there were some wrinkles on his face from the outline of his face, she could still see that when this old man was young, he was definitely a handsome man. This person couldn't be the 10,000-year-old otaku described in the book, the Caven who wasn't popular with girls because of his ordinary appearance. After thinking through all this, Irene's heart naturally raised a trace of vigilance. Now that the situation was unclear, it was better to be careful before determining whether the other party was a friend or foe. Just as Irene was thinking about the old man's identity, the old man finally opened his mouth to speak. "You're finally not here. Seems that everyone is here." The old man's face actually showed obvious excitement. There are really a lot of people entering the god's tomb this time. This lord has waited for this day for too long. This day has finally arrived. A hint of bloodthirsty madness appeared in the old man's eyes. He looked at the 10 people in the palace as if he was looking at a delicacy. He even licked his lips. Cohen, the leader of the third squad of the Inferno mercenary group, pulled his vice leader Mylane and retreated towards Mingxi and the others as fast as he could. Similarly, there were other people who had realized that something was wrong. However, after a breath, other than the pair of grandfather and grandson, as well as the 7th elder of the Adori family, Farley, all 4 of them, including Zicheng and Irene, had retreated to where Fengwu and the others were standing. "Who are you? You aren't God Caven." The old man who hadn't moved an inch suddenly raised his head to look at the mysterious person. If someone was standing beside or in front of the old man, they would find that his eyes were calm. He didn't even look at the so-called inheritance of God. Even the girl beside the old man just curiously glanced at the inheritance crystal a few times before standing there obediently, holding the old man's arm with her small hand. "Who am I? Of course I am the great devil god. And all of you puny humans will become my sacrifices." The old man who called himself a devil god didn't think of continuing to hide his identity. In his mind, these people had already fallen into his trap. There was no need to hide anything from humans who were destined to become sacrifices. "I see, I understand." The old man nodded. "It seems that this place is really a tomb of God. It's just that God Caven didn't expect that after his death, a devil god would occupy his tomb and use this place to recover from his injuries." Hearing the old man's words, everyone was in an uproar. They couldn't believe that the person sitting in front of them was a devil god from the Great War of Gods and Devils. This was not an ordinary devil, but a devil god. Speaking of the origin of the devil god, it was related to an ancient legend. According to the legend, in ancient times the world was in chaos. The divine emperor created the world and many innate gods were born. The divine emperor had 2 sons. One ruled the light, and the other ruled the darkness. Although the 2 were twins, because of the incompatibility of their attributes, they were destined not to live together. Only one of the light and the darkness could exist. The divine emperor didn't want to see only one of his children left, so he used his supreme divine power to split the world. The 2 divine princes became the sun and the moon. The divine prince of light became the sun, and the divine prince of darkness became the moon. From then on, the 2 divine princes never saw each other again. The 2 divine princes could live in the world they liked. It was a happy ending. But things didn't end there. The innate gods were divided into 2 factions because of the split between the 2 divine princes. One faction worshipped the light, and the other worshipped the darkness. The faction worshipped the darkness. The original golden divinity became black demonic. They called themselves the devil god, and created a world completely different from the divine world, which was the current devil world. According to the legend, the current devil world was one of the most powerful innate gods in ancient times. Moreover, he was ranked in the top 3 peerless powerhouses. The only ones who could truly be called demon gods were those demon gods who chose the dark demonic nature at the very beginning. The demons that came after that could only be called demons. They didn't have the bloodline of a god, so they couldn't be called demon gods. The devil god was far more powerful than ordinary devils. Even Mingxi only guessed that the other party was a superior devil. He didn't think that the other party was a devil god. Others might not know how terrifying the power of a devil god was, but Ming Shi, because of his identity, couldn't not know. His expression instantly became dignified. No matter how powerful a human was, it was impossible to be a match for a devil god. He subconsciously pulled Fengwu behind him to protect the young girl. Fengwu just looked at Ming Shi blankly, and didn't think much about it. She obediently stood next to Ming Shi. I didn't expect you to be so knowledgeable, little guy. You can actually see through this. The guy who called himself Devil God looked at the old man with some surprise. Although the old man's appearance was similar to his in terms of age, the Devil God didn't take advantage of the old man by calling him little guy. It's a pity that your injuries are too serious. Now, your strength is at most at the saint level. You don't even have the strength of a god level expert. The old man said indifferently. From the old man's tone, it could be seen that even if he knew the identity of the devil god, he didn't panic in his heart. Instead, he was very calm. Now, everyone present could see that this old man was not an ordinary person. He must be a very powerful existence. Otherwise, how could he not be afraid of a devil god? Chapter 162. Upon hearing the old man's words, a trace of anger flashed in the eyes of the old man who called himself the demon god, and the killing intent in his eyes became more obvious. So it's a little fellow at the saint level. Do you think that I will be defeated by you just because I can only maintain the strength of a saint level? Don't forget that I am the demon god. Even if I can only exert the strength of a saint level because of my injuries, I am not someone a weak human like you can easily defeat. Just now, the demon god only treated the old man and the others in front of him as food, so he did not spend any time studying their strength. After being seen through by the old man who called himself the demon god took some time to size up the old man in front of him. He saw that the other party was actually a saint-level expert, hidden among a group of ordinary swordsmen and mages. Unfortunately, so what if he was a saint-level expert? He was the most powerful demon god in the world. Even if his strength was only at the saint level, he was not someone a human could defeat. Everyone was secretly anxious. Even Farley, who had been coveting the inheritance crystal and was unwilling to retreat, obediently retreated when he heard the words demon god. Now he did not want any inheritance. He just wanted to save his life and get out of here. Although everyone was unwilling, they had no choice but to agree with the demon god. Even if they were in the same realm, the demon god and ordinary humans were not on the same level. If they were to fight the demon god of the same level as a human, they would be sending themselves to their deaths. Were they really going to die here? Everyone was worried. Ming Shi and Ajur exchanged glances. They were ready to help the warlock saint deal with the demon god at any time. Irene was prepared to enter the space and hide if the situation was not right. Zicheng was trying to contact the favorability system to see if he could exchange for anything useful to get out of this predicament. Everyone was thinking about how to escape or survive. Only Fengwu was the calmest. She still looked ahead with a poker face. She was not worried about the confrontation between a human and a demon in front of her. Her master had taught her to fight if she could win, and run if she could not win. To Fengwu, these were the only two options. Since that was the case, there was nothing to think about. Just when everyone was worried about their own survival, Fengwu poked Old Sack out from behind Ming Shi. That grandpa is wrong. He's not a demon god. He's just an ordinary demon. Fengwu's soft voice suddenly rang out in the hall. Her words successfully attracted everyone's attention. Fengwu found that so many people were looking at her, but she didn't feel embarrassed. Instead, she nodded her head firmly and emphasized that she wasn't lying. After hearing Fengwu's words, the demon god, who had looked high and mighty, as if all living beings were ants, suddenly changed his expression and looked like he couldn't believe it. Although he quickly realized that something was wrong and restrained his emotions, everyone still saw his momentary loss of control. Little girl, are you saying that he's not a demon god? The old warlock saint turned around and looked at Fengwu. The old warlock saint's face was still expressionless, but there was no malice in his eyes. Instead, there was a faint trace of admiration. It was naturally praiseworthy to be able to see through the true form of this demon. He's not. A real demon god coexists with the aura of a god and a demon. It's impossible for him to only sense the demonic aura. Fengwu did not cower because she was being stared at by a warlock saint. Instead, she maintained her poker face and spoke calmly. Coexisting with the aura of a god and a demon? The old warlock saint seemed a little doubtful and puzzled. The old warlock saint was not the only one who was puzzled. Even a juror Mingxi and the others did not understand what Fengwu was talking about. Everyone knew that demon gods had abandoned their divinity to become demon gods. Since they had become demons, how could they still have the aura of a god? If these people were all from the future world, they would definitely say in unison that this was illogical. Girl. Yes. Fengwu nodded her little head matter-of-factly. Demon gods have not completely abandoned their divinity. They have only turned half of their divinity into their demonic nature. Demon gods can freely switch between god and demon. When the two powers are separated, they are either pure demon or pure god. However, their strength will only be half of their peak. Only when the two powers are combined will they possess the power of a demon god. Everyone felt that they had learned something new. In the past, they had never known that this was the meaning of the word demon god. Were they called demon gods because they had both demonic nature and divinity at the same time? Originally, everyone thought that they were called demon gods because they had fallen from grace. When Fengwu explained what the power of a demon god was, the face of the fake demon god who claimed to be a demon god had already turned green. He stared at Fengwu so intensely that it was as if he could bore a hole through her. How do you know all this? The warlock saint seemed to have an inexplicable light in his eyes as he watched the dance. What Fengwu said could be considered the secrets of the two worlds. Even he, a warlock saint, did not know about it. Yet, an ordinary little girl was able to explain it so clearly. This made the old man suspect Fengwu's identity. I read it in a book. The old curator's library has everything. There is a book that records the demon gods. Fengwu looked at the old man with pity. She felt that this old man definitely did not like to read. Reading was good and one could learn a lot of things. Sure enough, Ajur was right. One would know everything by reading more books. The old man suddenly understood the young girl's gaze. His originally calm face twitched, and he suddenly felt that something was wrong. Was he being looked down upon by a little girl? Mingxi and Ajur also understood Fengwu's gaze. They secretly rejoiced in their hearts that someone had asked first. If they had asked first, they would be the ones being looked down upon. Ajur. The warlock saint is really a good person. The warlock saint, who had been labeled as a good person, was speechless. Little girl, since you know that gods and demons have both divinity and demonic nature at the same time, how do you know that I have not only revealed my demonic nature? The fake demon god was unwilling to give up. That's impossible. If you really have both divinity and demonic nature at the same time, your injuries would have healed long ago. I know that demons can absorb weaker or equally powerful demons to recover their strength. If you are a demon god, you would have absorbed the remaining power of both gods and demons to recover. Did you also read this in a book? Ajur wanted to know what kind of books Fengwu had been reading all day long. She could even talk about such obscure things so clearly. He had always thought that he was much more powerful than Fengwu. No, this would not do. When he went back, he had to work hard. He could not let the Fengwu girl surpass him. Fengwu nodded honestly. This child had always answered all questions. Of course, she would not say anything that she could not say. The Fengwu girl was pure, but she was not stupid. Chapter 163. Because of Fengwu's explanation, the true identity of the mysterious person who called himself a god was worth scrutinizing. It seems that not only is this guy not a real god, but he's also a demon with mediocre strength. Ajur looked disdainfully at this guy who was pretending to be a god. He thought that he might die here today. Who knew that this guy was so shameless that he even dared to pretend to be a god? When the others heard Ajur's words, they secretly nodded in agreement. If this demon was really a demon god or a powerful superior demon, he would have already absorbed weaker existences to recover. Looking at his current appearance, he was so old and weak. It was obvious that he hadn't recovered much even after tens of thousands of years. Just like what Fengwu said, if he was really such a powerful demon, how could he not be able to absorb other weaker demons to recover? Now that his injuries were so serious that he couldn't even maintain his youthful appearance, it could only mean that this guy wasn't such a powerful existence in the demon race. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in such a miserable state. Little guy, you've successfully angered this lord. The fake demon god's eyes were full of resentment and hatred. Most of this hatred was directed at Fengwu. Who asked Fengwu to expose his secret? In fact, Ajur's guess was right. This guy who called himself a god was just a weak demon soldier in ancient times. In the demon race, demon soldiers were like cannon fodder. His strength naturally couldn't compare to other demons. Even many demon soldiers like him were stronger than him. Fortunately, although he wasn't strong, he was very smart. He carefully hid on the battlefield. Although he was seriously injured, he still managed to survive. He secretly hid in the divine tomb of a heavenly god. He concealed his aura in the divine tomb, and finally managed to escape from the battle that killed countless people. It was just that his strength wasn't strong in the demon race at that time. It was impossible for him to absorb the power left behind by other demons in the two-realm battlefield to recover. In the demon race, the ranks were very clear. It was simply impossible for a low-level demon to absorb the power of a mid-level demon or a high-level demon. At that time, not only would he not be able to absorb the power, he would also suffer a powerful backlash and self-explode. Because of this demon couldn't recover his strength. He could only choose to sleep to slowly recover his original strength. If it wasn't for the opening of the divine tomb, there would be too many magicians and swordmasters. Although the strength of these humans wasn't very strong, they were still a great tonic for the demon. As long as he absorbed the power of these people, his injuries would be mostly healed. When the time came, he could return to the demon realm to slowly recover. Unfortunately, no matter how good his calculations were, this demon was still a god. The appearance of Fengwu, this demon was almost vomiting blood. Originally, he had a good plan, but who knew that a sage-level powerhouse would suddenly appear? Yes, he had already discovered that a warlock saint had appeared in this space. He didn't expose him just now because he wanted to create a mysterious atmosphere to scare the warlock saint so that he wouldn't dare to act rashly. If it wasn't for the appearance of the warlock saint, he wouldn't have thought of a way to impersonate the great demon god. He hoped that the great demon god wouldn't punish him. To put it bluntly, he was still a small soldier in the demon world. Even though he had lived for so many years, he still had a natural fear of high-level demons, not to mention the high and mighty demon god. It would be strange if he didn't feel nervous when impersonating the demon god. We detestable humans. Do you really think that I can't do anything to you? The demon laughed coldly. He had lied to these humans just now because he didn't want to directly confront the warlock saint and waste his strength. If they really fought, how would he, a dignified demon, be afraid of humans? Needless to say, ever since the demon's identity was exposed, Ajur and the others really didn't feel as afraid as they did at the beginning. Even the warlock saint, who had been calm all this while, heaved a sigh of relief. Although he had been expressionless just now, he was actually very nervous. He just didn't want to lose face in front of his granddaughter. Now, it was just a low-level demon, and they were all sage-level demons. Even if they couldn't defeat him, he was 50% confident that he could escape with his granddaughter. Everyone had their own plans. Only Fengwu didn't think so much. Although she said that this demon's level wasn't high and wasn't very powerful, Fengwu didn't underestimate him. The ancient demons were different from the current demons. At that time, the demon's blood was purer, and they were more powerful. Even if he was just a low-level demon, he shouldn't be underestimated. Mingxi also thought the same. When it came to the ancient demons, Mingxi wouldn't underestimate them. Even if the demon's level wasn't high, he definitely wasn't someone they could defeat with their current strength. No matter who you are, you can forget about escaping from here today, the warlock saint said calmly as he looked at the demon. Escape? What an arrogant human. You'd better look at your own feet before talking to me. The demon sneered in his heart. When he finished speaking, the entire hall was filled with red light. One by one, humans appeared in the red light. These people were the adventurers who had entered the tomb of the god of sin with them. What's going on? Why are we here? The adventurers who were still in the second stage were a little confused when they suddenly changed places. We're still in the tomb of the god of sin. I was clearly still trapped in the first stage. How did I appear here? Where is this place? Who knows? Come out and say something. Who can tell me what's going on? Amidst the roars of many men, This female voice wasn't so obvious. However, Mingxi and the others still heard it. They turned their heads and looked in the direction of the voice. Wasn't it the injured Elena? Mingxi walked over and brought Elena and the others over. Now everyone was here. Even Eve and Rika were found and brought over. The two girls immediately rushed to Zicheng's side. Ruglas, Arguros, Skycliff, Drew, Tingfeng, Tingyu and Peiqing immediately approached Fengwu and Mingxi. Drew, big brother Peiqing, where did you go? Xiaowu can't find you. Fengwu relaxed when she saw the two. She had been worried that something had happened to them. Naturally, she was happy to see them. Stop talking, we almost couldn't get out. Peiqing and Drew looked like they were still in shock. It looked like they had been given quite a scare by the nightmare corridor. Rika and Eve also came to Zicheng's side and told him what happened after they separated. Irene was not left out because when Elena appeared, she went to talk to her. Chapter 164. Their conversation didn't last long. Not long after these people appeared, a blood-red array pattern suddenly appeared on the ceiling and floor of the hall. With the appearance of these red array patterns, everyone felt that they couldn't move. It was as if their entire body was fixed in place. What's going on? Why can't I move? Who did this? What is he trying to do? If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have come to look for the divine weapon. I'm a swordsman, why would I want the inheritance of a sorcerer? Not to mention that I couldn't even pass the first level. I might even die here today, a man said with a long face. Isn't that right? I regret it so much that my intestines are turning green. I finally made it to the second level, but I almost died in the hands of a magical beast. I didn't pass the third level and now something like this has happened. If I had known that this month would be unfavorable for me, I wouldn't have come out no matter what. I would rather stay in the Adventurers Guild until the end, the man said as he beat his chest and stomped his feet. The entire hall was filled with panic screams and all sorts of regretful voices. These people regretted it more than once. Why did they rush forward as soon as they heard the words Tomb of the God of Sin? Now they were going to die here. These regretful voices and curses didn't last long because the demon soldiers had started to move. After the array in the hall was activated, it didn't only have the ability to fix people. Those who were fixed in place and closest to the demon soldiers couldn't help but move forward. When they were 2 meters away from the demon soldiers, the blood on their bodies automatically flowed into the demon soldiers' mouths. Those tall and burly men were sucked dry just like that and fell in front of everyone's eyes. It was only at this moment that most people noticed that there was an old man sitting in the hall. The key now wasn't the appearance of this old man, but the fact that this old man looked like a big boss at first glance. Moreover, he could suck people's blood. How were they going to deal with this? They didn't want to be sucked dry. This array was very powerful. Even someone as strong as the Warlock Saint was fixed in place. Fortunately, the Warlock Saint wasn't an ordinary person, so the demon soldiers didn't touch him. They only attacked the people who were teleported in. What's going on? Skycliff asked. Mingxi gave a simple account of what had happened. Everyone couldn't believe that there was actually a demon living in the god's tomb. Although this demon didn't sound very strong, he could use formations to suck blood. Moreover, he had the strength of a saint. Even if he was just a small soldier in the demon race in the human world, he was a boss. Of course, they didn't know the term boss. If they did, they wouldn't mind using it. Ancient demon clan? Interesting. When Tianya heard about the demons, not only was he not worried, his eyes even lit up with fighting spirit. To be able to see the word spirit in Tianya's cold eyes, it could only mean one thing. That was when he met a worthy opponent and wanted to fight with them. Fengwu stood at the side and didn't say anything. She watched as people were sucked dry and then turned into dried corpses. The demon clan was indeed a cruel race. Fengwu thought about the evaluation of the demon clan in the book. She didn't think of jumping out to save people, let alone being a savior. Master had said that one should do as much as one could. Because Xiaochun had eaten an all-element spirit, he was now sleeping like a drunk. Without Xiaochun's help, Fengwu didn't think that she could defeat an ancient demon clan. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but the demon clan, who had sucked the blood of more than 10 people, looked younger and younger. His originally old face had returned to a middle-aged man who was about 40 years old. Everyone knew that they couldn't let him recover like this. Otherwise, once he recovered his strength, everyone would die here. Even Ajur, who had just said that he looked down on the demon soldier, corrected his attitude. The demon soldier's strength wasn't great in the demon world, but in the human world he was a peerless expert. With the help of this strange formation, they were really in big trouble. After seeing how ferocious the demon soldier was, no one dared to underestimate him anymore. Just as everyone was about to attack, the warlock saint moved. The old man directly took out a green staff from the space. The staff looked ordinary, but no one dared to underestimate it. How could a warlock saint's weapon be ordinary? Later on, the small green staff used its strength to prove to the world that it was indeed not simple. The warlock saint also knew that the longer the battle dragged on, the more advantageous it would be for the demon soldier. He directly waved his staff and silently chanted a spell. As he chanted, the small green staff became more and more green. At the top of the staff, it was obvious that a powerful force was gathering. That warlock saint must be a wood elemental magician, Eve said to Zicheng. Although the others didn't say anything, they also thought so. The green light on the staff was so obvious that it was indeed a reaction from wood elemental magicians. It's not wood elemental magicians, Fengwu suddenly said softly. If you say it's not, then it's not. What kind of eyesight are you looking at? Can't you see that the green light only appears from wood elemental magicians? Eve didn't like Fengwu to begin with. Now that Fengwu actually refuted her words in public, she naturally didn't want to give Fengwu any face. Xiao Wu, did you see wrongly? That's obviously a green light. Although Tingyu didn't want to help Eve, the truth was so obvious. Even if she wanted to help her friend, she couldn't lie through her teeth. Even Elena and the others didn't know what to say. This was obviously the fluctuation of wood elemental magicians. As seniors, how could they distort the truth to help Fengwu? Only Ajur and Ming Shi had a mysterious smile on their faces and didn't join in the discussion. Some things were really hard to say. For example, a certain man finally married a beautiful woman and was waiting for the bride to finish bathing so that they could do it together. In the end, when the bride came out of the bath, the beautiful woman turned out to be a huge dinosaur. That feeling was really awesome. This story told us that even if you saw it with your own eyes, it might not be true. The beautiful woman you saw could be painted, the beautiful photo could be photoshopped, and any beautiful woman on the street could be a transvestite. And now this green staff told us that even though it looked green, it wasn't a wood elemental staff. After chanting the last word of the spell, the staff was gently waved in a pair of skinny old hands. A terrifying and powerful fire magic immediately attacked the demon soldier. The demon soldier wasn't to be trifled with. He separated his hands and muttered an incantation. 2 black balls of light appeared in his hands as he chanted the incantation. The black balls of light were filled with dark elemental energy. After the balls of light appeared, the demon soldier waved his hands and the 2 mysterious and powerful balls of light rushed towards the flames. Chapter 165. The 2 forces exploded in the air, and those who were close to them were sent flying. Those who were further away were also injured to a certain extent. Both parties exchanged chi magic and magic. Fire magic and dark magic intertwined in the air, and the whole palace shook as if it was in danger of collapsing at any time. Damn it, I still can't move. If we don't leave now, will we be crushed to death in this place? Elena tried to move her feet, but it was useless. Her feet were firmly stuck to the floor, and she couldn't move at all. Let's wait and see. We'll think of a way. Ming Shi's eyes flashed with worry, but he didn't say much. Don't be afraid. At most I'll open the seal later. I don't believe that we can't escape, Ajur said. It's useless. Where do you think this is? We can't communicate with the upper realm here. Where are you going to open the seal? Arguros said. Ajur had to admit that he really didn't think of this problem. Actually, I have a way that might be able to save us, Zicheng said hesitantly. To be honest, if she had a choice, she really didn't want to exchange for that thing. That thing required a lot of affinity points, and it wasn't very practical. However, at this time she had no choice but to do so. Irene sneered secretly. It seemed like the female lead couldn't help but use the things in the system. You said you have a way? Ruglaz asked suspiciously. A first-year kid telling you that she could solve a predicament that even a warlock saint couldn't solve. Anyone with a brain would be suspicious. Therefore, it wasn't strange that Rugless had doubts. However, Eve Zicheng's die-hard fan wouldn't allow anyone to doubt Zicheng. Senior Rugless, how can you doubt Little Chung? Little Chung has never lied. Eve didn't have the self-awareness of facing a senior and directly called out to Rugless. Although Eve's attitude wasn't good, Rugless didn't say anything. Instead, he felt a little embarrassed. On the other hand, Elena and Arguros were even more dissatisfied with Eve. This girl named Eve was too unruly. They really didn't know how such a girl could enter the Notre Dame du Starlight. What's the solution? Pei Qing didn't care what they were talking about. He was more interested in how to get out of this predicament. The method is very simple. I have a scroll of array-breaking scroll here. As long as you place the scroll at the eye of the array, it can break any array in the world. Zicheng took out the scroll he had exchanged for and showed it to everyone. A brilliant scroll of array breaking appeared in front of everyone. This scroll looked extraordinary. It was no wonder that Zicheng said that such a small scroll could break any array in the world. But where is the eye of the formation? Tingyu asked. Everyone was stumped. There really wasn't a professional in array among them. It's under that person, Fengwu said. Although Fengwu didn't speak much, she had been paying attention to the movements of the people around her. When she heard that they were looking for the eye of the array, she naturally pointed out the location of the eye of the array. Everyone looked at the position where the demon soldier was sitting. It was right in front of the main hall, a little far from where they were. They couldn't move now, so it was impossible for them to go over. Moreover, even if they went over, it wouldn't be of much use. Didn't they see that the demon soldier was sitting there motionless? Even when he fought with the warlock saint, he didn't move. It seemed that the possibility of him moving was really low. How did you know, Xiao Wu? Ajur asked curiously. Just like that. Fengwu looked at Ajur strangely, as if she didn't understand why he asked this. The fight between the warlock saint and the demon soldier became more and more intense. The man and the demon used all their means, but in the end, the demon soldier was more skillful. The warlock saint was defeated and spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. As expected of an ancient demon soldier. Even if they were in the same realm, they weren't an opponent that could be defeated by humans of the same realm. You're just a mere human. You're really overestimating yourself, the demon queen said sarcastically. The warlock saint's expression was ugly. He looked at the demon soldier with an undisguised murderous intent. The young girl beside him looked at her grandfather worriedly, but she didn't dare to say anything to distract him. Don't be complacent. This is no longer the ancient human world. The human world already has the power to protect its own world. Even if you leave, you won't be able to escape the arrest of the arbitration tribunal. Everyone present knew that the warlock saint was speaking the truth. As long as this demon was born, the elites of the arbitration tribunal would rush over immediately. This demon wouldn't be able to escape the punishment of the arbitration tribunal. It was a pity that they were facing an old demon soldier that had been cooped up for tens of thousands of years. It wasn't interested in the new power of the human world at all. Instead, it thought that the warlock saint was moaning before he died. The warlock saint, the only combat power on the human side, was already seriously injured. After the warlock saint lost most of his combat power, the demon soldier continued to absorb blood to increase its power. One by one, the human powerhouses turned into dried corpses. Their screams echoed in the hall again and again, making one's hair stand on end. Don't suck my blood. Don't let me go. Let me go, I beg you. Don't suck my blood. You have to suck them. Don't suck my blood. Shrill cries rose and fell in succession within the hall, and the cries were filled with resentment and unwillingness. What should we do? If we don't act now, it'll be our turn soon, Rika said anxiously. That's right. With the speed at which the demon soldier was absorbing blood, if they couldn't break the array, everyone would die. Xiaochun had woken up? Fengwu sensed the movement in her dantian and sent her consciousness into it. Sure enough, she saw that Xiaochun's entire sword was much more agile. It even turned in circles to greet her. Xiaochun, there's a powerful guy outside. Can you lure it away? Fengwu asked. Xiaochun waved his sword, as if to say that it was no problem. While Fengwu and Little Silver were communicating, Mingxi and the others were also discussing how to lure the demon away, and how to place the array-breaking scroll at the eye of the array. Neither of these two matters was something that could be done normally. Now that the two matters were placed together, it could be said that it was impossible to accomplish anything. If they hadn't been trapped in the array, it would have been fine. Unfortunately, they were all trapped now. Even the only warlock saint who could possibly escape was seriously injured. What should they do? Why don't you try using your pure purple heavenly sunfire? Rika said hesitantly. When Rika said this, everyone thought of something. That's right, Zicheng had the heavenly fire. Perhaps the demon soldier would automatically leave the eye of the array after being burned by the heavenly fire. Chapter 166. They hadn't thought of it before, but the more they thought about it, the more feasible it seemed. Other than Mingxi, Skycliff, and a few others, the majority looked at Zicheng with hope. Zicheng looked back at the crowd awkwardly and said, "I'm sorry to disappoint everyone. Although my pure purple heavenly sunfire is powerful, it can't be too far away from me. That demon soldier is too far away from me. My heavenly fire can't touch him at all." Zicheng had thought of this method before, but it was destined to be impossible. Rika and the others sighed in disappointment. After a while, more and more adventurers were killed. Only a few people standing near the door were still alive. Those in the front and center were unlucky and died. Only Meow Meow and a few others were left standing there alone. They were so scared that they almost cried. "Help, I don't want to die. My wife is about to give birth. What will happen to her if I die? My mother is still waiting for me to go back and marry her. Don't kill me." All kinds of desperate screams were heard. The cold-blooded demon soldier wouldn't be merciful just because these people were crying. These were all energy that could help him recover his strength. How could he let them go? Because the demon soldier had absorbed a large amount of human blood, he looked younger and younger. Now he looked like he was in his early 30s. The current demon soldier didn't look old at all. Just when everyone was in despair, an ancient silver sword suddenly flew out of Fengwu's dantian. This sword that suddenly flew out was, of course, Xiaochun. After Xiaochun came out of Fengwu's dantian, he was very excited. He hadn't come out for a long time. The last time he came out, he came and went in a hurry. He didn't have time to show the world the power of his pure sword. How could he let this happen? "Xiaochun, do your best." Fengwu's face was expressionless. She imitated a Juran tank when they cheered her on. Unfortunately, her face was expressionless. This cheering wasn't convincing at all. Fortunately, Xiaochun was not a calculative divine sword. To him, receiving a cheer from his master was enough to make Xiaochun fly with joy. As soon as Xiaochun appeared, Mingxi and the others recognized him. Wasn't this the divine sword that appeared last time? Zicheng and Irene looked at Xiaochun with complicated expressions. That sword looked extraordinary, and they wondered how Fengwu had obtained it. Eve's heart was filled with envy. How could Fengwu get all the good things? That sword must be a sacred artifact. It possessed such a spiritual nature. How could such a spiritual object choose a two-faced woman like Fengwu as its master? What a blind man! This was the first time Rika saw Xiaochun appear. Although she had heard that Fengwu had helped them a lot on the way here, she had thought that these seniors were just trying to make Fengwu look good. She didn't expect that such a thing was true. How could a commoner be so lucky to obtain such a spiritual weapon? Rika and Eve were the same. They thought that Xiaochun was at most a sacred artifact. They didn't even think that it was a divine artifact. As soon as Xiaochun appeared, he kissed Fengwu for a while before flying towards the demon soldier. The moment Xiaochun appeared, the demon soldier immediately felt a fatal danger. He looked in the direction where the sense of danger came from, and his eyes widened. Impossible! It can't be! How could it appear in the lower realm? The demon soldier shouted in shock. The warlock saint also looked at Xiaochun thoughtfully. He seemed to be recalling the divine artifacts in the ancient records. No matter how hard he thought, he couldn't figure out where this sword came from. Xiaochun didn't give the demon soldier too much of a chance to speak. He had come out to make the demon soldier move, not to talk to it. Xiaochun flew closer to the demon soldier. He didn't even need to attack. The demon soldier ran away as if it had seen a ghost. It didn't even care about the people in the hall who were still alive. It actually escaped just like that. It escaped. Xiaochun saw that the demon soldier actually gave him face. He flew back and acted cute to Fengwu. Fengwu touched Xiaochun's sword. Xiaochun is really capable. Xiaochun's sword was perfect. He was embarrassed to be praised by his master. There was no one controlling the magic array. Now they didn't have to worry about their blood being sucked out. However, if they didn't destroy the center of the magic array, they could only wait for the magic array to run out of energy before they could leave. In the current situation, there was no time for them to wait. What if the demon soldier came back? Fengwu asked Zicheng for a scroll to break the magic array. She didn't have to trouble two people for the same task. She hung the scroll on Xiaochun's sword. The hard-working Xiaochun obediently placed the scroll in the center of the magic array. Then he used the sword to cut the knot that tied the scroll. Once the knot was cut, the magic array activated automatically. A soft white light quickly surrounded the entire hall from the center of the magic array. A few minutes later, the red light disappeared. Just like that, the magic array disappeared. Everyone who was trapped in this blood array was saved. The people who were still alive almost knelt down and cheered. They believed that after this incident, no one would dare to enter any ancient tombs to explore. It would take a few years for them to recover from this psychological trauma. After Xiaochun completed his task, he returned to Fengwu's Dantun. Regarding Xiaochun's miraculous abilities, the survivors naturally saw it. Some guessed that it was a sacred weapon, some thought it was a divine weapon. In short, whether it was a sacred weapon or a divine weapon, that sword was a good thing that they didn't even dare to dream of. And such a powerful weapon was actually in the hands of a little girl. What was the difference between this and a child holding a gold bar in the downtown area? Just when everyone was sighing that a little girl like Fengwu could actually have such a powerful weapon, two figures, one purple and one green, moved at the same time. After the purple and green figures moved, several other figures moved at the same time. These people's goal was very similar. It was precisely the inheritance crystal that was thrown by the demon soldier. The purple and green figures were naturally Zicheng and Irene. In addition to the captain and vice-captain of the third team of the Inferno mercenary group, there were also the seventh elder of the Idoli family, Farley, the sixth elder of the Lianya family, Shiat, and the captain of the fourth team of the werewolf mercenaries. Apart from these people, there were also two experts from other families. These people all reacted quickly. As soon as they were teleported over, they retreated more than 10 steps in the direction of the door. This was how they managed to preserve their lives and prevent the demon soldier from sucking their blood to heal their wounds. In an instant, there were 9 people who joined the fight for the inheritance crystal. However, the strongest of them all, the warlock Saint Manzi, and the warlock saint's granddaughter Edith, didn't seem to care about the inheritance crystal at all. Manzi only looked in the direction that the demon soldier had escaped. After thinking for a while, he disappeared from the hall with his granddaughter, Edith. Chapter 167. The 9 people who were originally worried that Manzi would make a move on the inheritance crystal, heaved a sigh of relief when they saw Manzi leave. They now viewed each other as enemies and were secretly on guard. Originally, beginner magicians didn't have the ability to fly. Logically speaking, Zicheng and Irene shouldn't have been able to compete with the great swordsmen and great magicians in terms of speed. However, the two women had their own fortuitous encounters. They both had luxurious items like flight scrolls, which allowed beginner magicians to fly for a period of time. The two women each used a flight scroll, which was why they weren't inferior to the 7 experts in terms of speed. Mingxi only glanced at Irene and Zicheng before turning his head. Let's leave this place first. We can't stay here for long. We have to send news of the existence of the demonic soldier to the Star Hall. When the time comes, the experts of the Star Hall will naturally come to subdue the demonic soldier. Unlike Irene and Zicheng, who were most concerned about the god's inheritance, Mingxi was most concerned about whether the demonic soldier had escaped or not. If it had really escaped, where would it go? The demonic soldier was naturally savage and bloodthirsty. If they didn't find it quickly, more people would die. Mingxi is right. We should do that. However, we are now trapped here. How do we get out? Ruglas walked to the entrance of the palace and opened it completely. He saw that the sky outside was overcast. and the air was still filled with the stench of blood. He couldn't see the exit at all. At this time in the hall, after the initial fight between the 9 people, the other survivors who hadn't recovered from their shock finally came to their senses. In this hall there was still a god's inheritance to fight for, so there was no time to chat. The magician immediately joined in, and the swordsman also joined in after thinking for a while. Even if he couldn't use it himself, he could still make a lot of money by selling it to others. At this time, whoever retreated would be a big idiot. Originally, there were only 9 people fighting for the inheritance. Now it had turned into a chaotic battle involving dozens of people. After the demonic soldier sucked them dry, there were less than 50 people left alive. Most of them were tempted by the words, God's inheritance. They did not care if the inheritance was useful to them. For the sake of the benefits, most of them took action. Even Rika and Eve had joined in. Eve naturally wanted to help Zicheng, while Rika's favorability towards Zicheng hadn't reached 100% yet. Naturally, she was more concerned about herself. The reason why she helped was because she wanted to fish in troubled waters. In the end, she was driven by her own interests. In the chaos of the palace, the people who were lucky to survive just now only had interests in their eyes. They had completely forgotten about the danger of death. Mingxi and the others who didn't fight for the inheritance had already left the palace and appeared outside the palace. There were a few adventurers who followed them out. They were all really smart people. They didn't know if the demonic soldier would come back. The restriction here obviously hadn't been lifted. At this time they didn't want to escape, but wanted to obtain the inheritance. Wasn't that courting death? Unfortunately, such a simple logic wasn't something that everyone could understand. Fengwu followed Mingxi and the others out of the palace. The group of people lingered outside the palace, each of them thinking of a way out. Fengwu didn't know much about restrictions and couldn't see where the way out was. This place was barren, and it was impossible to ask the plants to find a way out. Fengwu was a little depressed. The demonic soldier had escaped, and everyone was trapped. If only she was a little stronger and could use all of Xiaochun's strength. In the eyes of others, Xiaochun was incomparably powerful. The Infernal Queen fled when she saw him. But as the owner of the pure sword, Fengwu knew that Xiaochun could purify all the evil in the world. The demonic soldier killed people like scything flax and had a cruel heart. Once Xiaochun got close to him, he would naturally be purified by Xiaochun. However, only Fengwu knew that Xiaochun's strength was indeed very strong. His purification ability was top-notch, but if she really wanted to use Xiaochun to fight someone, she couldn't do it now. Xiaochun's strength was too strong. With her strength, using Xiaochun's move could empty her body of strength. If she had used Xiaochun to fight the demonic soldier, after one move, if the demonic soldier hadn't been destroyed, she would have been dead. That was because it was easy for the demonic soldier to kill a person who had lost her strength. Although Xiaochun had intelligence, his range of movement was limited by Fengwu's power. If it wasn't for Fengwu's power being too low, the demonic soldier wouldn't have been able to escape from the pure sword's pursuit even if he used all of his trump cards. In this battle, Fengwu saw her own shortcomings. If she was a little stronger, the demonic soldier wouldn't have been able to escape from the pure sword. Now they wouldn't have been trapped here. After coming to this world for a while, Fengwu was no longer the ignorant girl who lived on Mount Yuehua. She knew the importance of strength. Just like what her master said. No matter where she went, strength spoke louder than words. Sure enough, what her master said was right. She must work harder in the future. She must become a peerless expert like her master. Her master was so powerful. No one dared to come to Mount Yuehua to challenge her master. In the future, she must be as powerful as her master. Fengwu secretly vowed in her heart. Fengwu's thoughts drifted far away, but no one noticed. They were all thinking about how to leave this place. Mingxi was very calm. He frowned sometimes and was deep in thought. At first glance, it was obvious that he was thinking about something serious. Elena and the others didn't disturb Mingxi. Unknowingly, the battle in the hall had come to a conclusion. Zicheng and Irene, these 2 little girls who were originally not in the eyes of the 7 experts, became the dark horses of this battle. Zicheng had countless magic tools in his hands, and all kinds of scrolls were flying all over the sky. Irene was also not someone to be trifled with. No one would have thought that Irene actually contracted a baby sacred beast. Although this sacred beast was only in its infancy, its identity as a sacred beast was there. Even if it was still weak, it was not something that ordinary people could resist. This sacred beast was actually one of the opportunities that Zicheng would get in the future. The place where it was located was somewhat hidden, but there was no danger. Irene used her own foresight to go to that place one step ahead of Zicheng, and successfully contracted the egg of the sacred beast. That was how this baby sacred beast was born. According to the original work, this little guy had to stay in the egg for more than a year before it could meet Zicheng and break out of the egg with the help of Zicheng's blood. Now, because of the arrival of Irene, some things in the book had been brought forward. The sacred beast was also born from the egg more than a year earlier. This baby sacred beast shape was somewhat like a puppy. It was very cute. If it wasn't for the genuine sacred beast's aura, no one would believe that it was a sacred beast. Chapter 168. As soon as the little sacred beast appeared, it immediately created a shield to cover Irene. At the same time, it launched an attack. Everyone only saw a bright light before their eyes. It was so bright that they couldn't open their eyes. They had no choice but to close their eyes to prevent their eyes from being hurt by the strong light. Oh no! At this time, most of the experts already knew that they had been tricked. Unfortunately, they couldn't see anything with such strong light. Zicheng covered her eyes with her hand. She was also very anxious. She had underestimated Irene's combat power. Although she was just a beginner like her methods were not weak. She had actually contracted such a powerful sacred beast. When the strong light illuminated the entire hall, Zicheng knew that something was wrong. As expected, when she opened her eyes again, the inheritance crystal had disappeared. At the same time, Irene and her sacred beast had disappeared. At the same time that the inheritance crystal disappeared, the entire space began to shake. Then, starting from the sky, it turned into pieces of rocks and fell from the sky. A large light hole appeared in the sky. The aura of the outside world came from there. If there were no accidents, that was obviously the exit. Originally, the exit would only appear after someone had obtained the inheritance. Mingxi and the others were naturally delighted. They used various methods to fly in the air and headed toward the exit in the sky. When they passed through the light hole, they found that they had indeed appeared in the two-realm battlefield. At this time, the sky was already dark. When they had entered, it was clearly still daytime. They didn't know how long they had been in the tomb of the god of sin. The moment Mingxi came out of the tomb of the god of sin, he immediately used a special method to contact the Star Hall. He believed that the Star Hall would soon send people over to eliminate the demonic soldier who had killed countless people. As time passed, more and more survivors appeared in the two-realm battlefield. Except for some who were unlucky and died in the chaotic battle later on, the rest were adventurers who hadn't been killed by the demonic soldier. Zicheng was naturally among them. When she realized that Irene had disappeared, she had also thought of looking for her. However, when the exit appeared, she immediately gave up on the idea of staying behind to look for Irene. The inheritance of God was hard to come by, but she had the system in her hands. As long as she worked hard in the future, she could even exchange for the bloodline of God, let alone the inheritance. Although it was a pity to lose a god's inheritance, it wasn't too painful. The others didn't have such a good mentality. They believed that after today, Irene would definitely become the #1 public enemy of these aristocratic families. After all, since she dared to snatch food from the mouths of these aristocratic families and mercenary groups, how could these people let her off so easily? When these people left the divine tomb, the first thing they did was to search for Irene's figure. Unfortunately, they couldn't find her. When Irene had decided to snatch the inheritance, she had already made all the preparations. How could she be so easily caught? All of you stop right there. Hand over the girl who snatched the inheritance. Otherwise, don't even think about leaving this place. The sixth elder of the Lianya family, Shiat, gloomily looked at Mingxi and the others, killing intent surfacing in his eyes. The seventh elder of the Italy family, Farley, also surrounded them. This time, the great families had suffered great losses. Most of the juniors they brought out for training had died in the divine tomb. Only a few of them were lucky enough to survive. If they couldn't bring the inheritance back, they would definitely be held accountable. After all, Many of these juniors were the descendants of the upper echelons of the family. They couldn't be easily harmed. Now that so many of them had died, even as elders of the family, they wouldn't be able to explain it. In short, in order to give an explanation to the family, even if the inheritance crystal had been fused with someone else, they still had to bring the little brat back. As long as they brought back the little brat who had fused with the inheritance, they wouldn't have to be afraid of being held accountable by the family. Although only the Italy family and the Lienya family acted, the survivors of the other great forces also stepped forward to make things difficult for them. However, they didn't intend to meddle in other people's business. This time the great families had suffered great losses. It was better to think about how to make up for it. How would we know where she went? Who wouldn't be angry that she stole the inheritance? If we could find her, I would be the first to come after her. Why would I still be standing here? Eve had long regarded the inheritance as Zicheng's possession. Now that Irene had snatched the inheritance, Eve naturally regarded her as an enemy. Naturally, her tone wasn't very good. Although Eve's tone was bad, her reasoning was reasonable. Just now they didn't care whether Eve and Rika had participated in the snatching. However, Zicheng had indeed taken action. It was obvious that Zicheng also had the intention to snatch the inheritance. Of course, it was also possible that the two of them were originally in cahoots. Just now, Zicheng had acted at the same time as Irene, who had snatched the inheritance. The two of them had also come together. Naturally, they would be regarded as a group. Mingxi and the others naturally thought of this point. Regardless of whether they had snatched the inheritance or not, Irene had indeed acted together with them from the beginning. Now that she was suspected of being an accomplice, it wasn't strange at all. Don't try to quibble. The few of you are obviously in cahoots. Are you staying here to cover for your accomplices to escape? The seventh elder of the Adori family, Farley, shouted sternly. This shout was obviously infused with magic energy. Eve bore the brunt of the attack and immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Fengwu and the others were a little better. Most of Farley's attack was aimed at Eve. Although the others weren't feeling well, other than dizziness and ringing in their ears, they didn't feel any other discomfort. If the few of you want to take action, please do so. There's no need to pin this groundless accusation on us. Arguros looked down on the elders of these two great families. They were still elders of great families, yet they could lower themselves to make things difficult for a few students. He didn't know how these people became elders of their families. Fengwu, Mingxi, Ajur, Skycliff and the others all stared at the elders of these two great families. Each of them was ready to fight. A few youngsters who don't know what's good for them. It seems like you've made up your mind to protect that stinking brat who stole the inheritance. If you don't hand her over, don't blame us two old men for bullying the weak. The sixth elder of the Lienya family, Shiat, wasn't someone who cared about his face. This guy was famous for being a poisonous snake. Once he set his eyes on a target, no matter if it was a man or a woman, old or young, he would never let them go. Moreover, this person was narrow-minded. Now that he couldn't capture Irene, he naturally wanted to vent his anger on his accomplices. Of course, he also conveniently used Mingxi and the others to lure Irene out. Even though he knew that the possibility of Irene appearing because of these people was very small, Shiat didn't want to give up even the slightest hope. Chapter 169. Farley's thoughts were similar to Shiat's. He also wanted to use these little guys to lure out Irene. At the same time, he also understood that the possibility of doing so was very small. However, so what if the possibility was small? If they wanted to blame someone, they could only blame these guys for being with that hateful girl. Even if they couldn't find her, it was still good to vent their anger on these guys. Those who hadn't left yet stood at the side, whispering to each other while pointing at Fengwu's group. Most of them had pity in their eyes, but most of them were gloating. No one wanted to risk offending the two great families by extending their hands to Fengwu's group. Cohen of the Inferno Mercenary Group naturally saw this as well. During this treasure hunt in the Divine Tomb, other than picking some spirit fruits and herbs, they didn't gain anything special. Most importantly, many of their brothers had died this time. Could be considered a huge loss. Fortunately, the members of the Inferno Mercenary Group were more open-minded. Although they didn't obtain the inheritance, They didn't want to make things difficult for the students of the Notre Dame du Starlight. They didn't expect Chiat and Idori families Farley to be so shameless. After losing the inheritance, they went to make things difficult for the students of the other families. They didn't know how such narrow-minded people could become elders of such great families. You guys have the nerve to say that. You actually made a move on innocent people. The Lienya and Idori families are really shameless. Cohen's disdainful sneer sounded at this time. Chiat and Farley instinctively looked over, wanting to see which reckless person dared to offend the elders of their two great families at the same time. In the end, when they turned around, they saw that it was actually the members of the Inferno mercenary group. Their hearts sank. They didn't expect Cohen of the Inferno mercenary group to stand up for a group of students. Their expressions turned ugly. What? I hit the nail on the head. You have nothing to say. Seeing that the two of them didn't say anything, Cohen simply walked over with Miriam. The two of them stood not far from Farley and Chiat and sneered. Cohen, this has nothing to do with you. We don't want to be enemies with the Inferno mercenary group. You better take your people and leave quickly. Mind your own business. Farley said to the two people standing not far from him. If I do, what are you going to do? Cohen wasn't going to fall for his tricks. Others might be afraid of the two families' influence, but the Inferno mercenary group wasn't afraid at all. Moreover, the Inferno mercenary group was the same as the Lienya and Italy families. They were all big forces, and it wasn't easy for big forces to become enemies with each other. After all, if they really fought, it wouldn't be good for anyone. At most, it would just be a few small fights and it would be over. Cohen's arrogant words made the faces of the elders of the two families turn even uglier. It seemed like this fellow was determined to get involved. Do you really want to stand up for these unrelated people? Chiat's face was gloomy, and his tone was a little strange. That's right. It's my fault for not being used to seeing you guys bully others like this. If you lose in the inheritance fight, that's because you're not as skilled as others. What's the point of venting your anger on other people's classmates? I just can't stand your way of doing things. Cohen, do you think I don't dare to attack you? Chiat's sinister voice sounded as dark magic elements floated around his body. Cohen didn't want to be outdone and released his Do Chi. Both of them were elders of big forces, so their strength naturally couldn't be underestimated. Captain Cohen, thank you for being willing to help us at this time. Let us deal with the rest ourselves. Ming-Shi spoke at this time. His voice was clear and pleasant to the ears, and it seemed to have some kind of soothing power. Can you guys do it? Cohen asked doubtfully. He was a little worried that these little guys would try to be brave. Although Chiat and Farley's character wasn't good, their strength was undeniable. Students like Ming-Shi and the others were no match for those two old men. There shouldn't be any problems, Ming-Shi smiled lightly. His smile was clear and light, and it made people feel comfortable. Since that's the case, you guys be careful. Originally, Cohen wanted to help, but it was obvious that the other party didn't want him to interfere. Cohen wasn't a person who liked to meddle. Since the other party said that they didn't need his help, why would he meddle in their affairs? On the other hand, Chiat and Farley looked at Ming-Shi and the others as if they were looking at fools. Originally, with Cohen's help, Ming-Shi and the others had some hope of escaping from their hands. But now, the only person who could save them had been pushed away by them. What was the difference between this and suicide? Are they stupid? They actually didn't let Captain Cohen help. Who do they think they are? They're just a few students who haven't graduated yet. Do they really think they have the strength of a great magician or a great swordsman? Isn't that right? I've never seen such a fool. Say, do you guys think they're so strong that they can fight against two great magicians? Is that why they didn't let Captain Cohen help? Maybe. Young people really don't know much. They only learn magic and Do Chi for a few years and they already dare to challenge great magicians. They really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Maybe they really have the strength. Strength, my ass. What kind of strength can a kid in his teens or 20s have? In short, no one was optimistic about Ming-Shi and the others. Some felt that Ming-Shi and the others thought too highly of themselves and didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Others felt that they were blinded by the title of geniuses and thought that they were invincible. Those who could enter the Notre Dame du Starlight were all geniuses. That was the place where geniuses gathered. Many of the Notre Dame du Starlight students thought highly of themselves and thought that Ming-Shi and the others were students who had been blinded by the halo of geniuses. Were Ming-Shi and the others really as useless as those people thought? The answer was, of course, impossible. We still have things to do. If you want to fight, please hurry. Skycliffe's cold face didn't reveal any emotions, but the impatience in his words was quite obvious. Although his tone was normal, one could still feel his impatience. Uncles, are you two looking for a fight? Fengwu blinked, then turned to ask a juror. Fengwu's evaluation of these two was that they were two annoying uncles. Why did they have to talk so much when they wanted to fight? If they could save the time they had to talk, the fight would have been over long ago. The two elders who had no idea that they were being criticized by Fengwu for wasting time were currently mocking Ming-Shi, and the others in their hearts for not knowing the immensity of heaven and earth. Right? Anyway, they aren't here to eat with us. A juror looked at the two elders with disdain, deeply despising their characters. They spoke as if the inheritance belonged to their two families. How shameless. Brat, you're courting death. The two elders were, after all, the elders of two large families. When had they ever been ridiculed by the younger generation? They were instantly enraged. Each of them shot a magic ball at a juror and Fengwu. The two elders used at least 70% of their strength this time. They were deliberately trying to injure the two of them. Chapter 170. Unfortunately, the two of them had underestimated the strength of Ming-Shi's party. Before the two balls of light could reach Fengwu and a juror, they were destroyed by a snow-white long sword. This was a magic attack made by two 7th-level great magicians. Yet it was destroyed by a single sword strike. This was impossible, this wasn't a dream. Not to mention how inconceivable Shiat and Farley were. Even the surrounding adventurers felt as if they were dreaming. If you want to do it, then do it quickly, don't talk too much nonsense. Skycliffe's long sword had already been unsheathed. The blade was wrapped with an ice-cold sword intent. This was the ice sword intent, the first type of sword intent that Skycliffe had comprehended. There were many swordsmen present, but there weren't many who could reach the level of sword intent. Sword intent was a very mysterious thing. Only a great swordsman who had comprehended sword intent had the opportunity to become a great swordsman. Although there were many great swordsmen, there were very few who could surpass the great swordsman realm and reach the level of great swordsman. Many people were trapped in the realm of great swordsmen for their entire life, unable to become a great swordsman even at the end of their lives. The reason for this was because they couldn't comprehend sword intent. Those who could reach the realm of great swordsmen knew that the earlier one comprehended sword intent, the higher the potential of that person. Only then would they have the hope of reaching a higher realm in the future. Skycliffe was only in his 20s, he was still a youth at first glance. But now, he had comprehended sword intent that many great swordsmen couldn't comprehend. This was simply a super genius. Good boy, you are really talented. To be able to comprehend sword intent at such a young age, you are much stronger than most great swordsmen. Are you interested in becoming a guest elder of our Italy family? As long as you agree, I won't care about your disrespect towards me. As a great magician, Farley naturally had good eyesight. He was able to see Skycliffe's terrifying talent in swordsmanship at a glance. He was afraid that Skycliffe would become a great swordsman or great swordsman in the future. He might even reach the height of a magic swordsman. Reaching a higher realm was not something they dared to think about. If they could befriend such a promising young man, it would be beneficial to their Idori family. For various reasons, Farley really wanted to let go of Skycliffe, who had spoken rudely to them just now. Our Linya clan also welcomes you to join us. As long as you are willing to become a guest elder of our Linya clan, we are willing to provide you with cultivation resources, and all of our grievances will be written off. What do you think? Shiat was also very sincere. As an elder of the family, the first thing he would think about was the family's interests. Unless they were certain that they couldn't rope in this genius, the two of them wouldn't immediately make a move on Skycliffe. His luck is too good. I thought that this young man was dead for sure. That's right. To be invited by two great families to become a guest elder is a great honor. Moreover, you won't have to worry about cultivation resources in the future. If it were me, I would immediately agree. Come on, look at how old you are. Even if you were to throw yourself at them, they wouldn't take a liking to you. What are you talking about? You guys talk too much nonsense. Just when everyone thought that Skycliff would be overjoyed and agree, he directly said something that made them want to stab him to death. Was this a rejection? Is he really refusing? Aren't you just courting death? It was such a good thing, why aren't you willing? The spectators couldn't understand. Meanwhile, Shiat and Farley were so angry that their faces turned red. This was the first time they had encountered someone who didn't give them any face. The anger in their hearts almost burned their hair. Both of them wanted to kill Skycliff. Although they wanted to rope in a genius, it was better to destroy him if they couldn't. After today's incident, this genius definitely wouldn't have a good impression of their two great families. Since that was the case, they might as well let him die here. It was better than waiting for him to grow and become an enemy of their two great families. Courting death. Shiat shouted with a gloomy expression. The element of darkness surged, and several balls of darkness flew towards Skycliff. Skycliff calmly drew a sword in the air, following which Skycliff activated a sword technique. The long sword in his hand moved as fast as lightning towards the balls of light. This time Shiat used his full strength. In order to prevent a genius who was hostile to the Lienya family from growing, he had to kill him. Senior Skycliff, will you be alright? Rika worriedly pulled on Zicheng's sleeve, her heart in turmoil. If she had known that she would encounter such a situation, she wouldn't have come to the two-realm battlefield. Little Chung. Similarly, Eve was also worried. Zicheng's other sleeve was tightly gripped by Eve. She also had a nervous expression on her face. It's fine. Zicheng calmly smiled at the two of them. Unlike these two, Zicheng had countless trump cards in his hands. Naturally, he wasn't worried about his life. Because of Zicheng's calmness, the two of them relaxed a little. Ajur originally wanted to comfort Fengwu, but Fengwu didn't give him the chance. Her eyes were bright as she stared at Skycliff's attack. Skycliff's sword techniques were clean and neat, but his killing power was extremely high. Although he wasn't a great swordsman yet, he was still able to fight against a great magician without showing any signs of defeat. This kind of strength was indeed worthy of being the valedictorian of the 4th grade. Curse of Darkness. Seeing that the balls of darkness weren't of much use, Shiat waved his staff again. This time his chanting time was even shorter. When he chanted the 4 words, the surrounding light disappeared. Everyone seemed to have sunk into darkness. No one could see each other's existence. Not good. Looks like this old man really wants to take that youth's life. Cohen cursed. Captain, you know that the two of them won't let such a dangerous person live. Miriam didn't want his captain to interfere too much. It wouldn't be good for the Inferno mercenary group. Although they weren't afraid of the strength of the two families, it wasn't a good thing to make enemies for no reason. Cohen could only sigh deeply. He felt pity for Skycliff. The youth's temperament was indeed too impulsive. High-level dark magic, Curse of Darkness. When the magic was activated, it would envelop the surrounding area in darkness. As for how wide the area was, it would depend on the person's realm. With Shiat's realm as a great magician, the power of such a high-level magic was naturally very strong. The moment the magic was activated, even those who were watching the show were enveloped in darkness. It's so dark. Fengwu frowned. She wasn't used to the sudden darkness. Xiaowu, don't be afraid. I'm here. Ajur thought that she was afraid. Didn't she see Rika and Eve screaming in fear? I'm not afraid. Fengwu wasn't a coward. Ajur thought that Fengwu was afraid. Chapter 171. Ajur couldn't see Fengwu's expression, but he could guess that the Fengwu girl was unhappy. Yes, our Fengwu is the bravest, why would she be afraid of a little darkness? Ajur tried to pacify Fengwu, and sure enough, Fengwu immediately became happy. If it wasn't for the fact that it was so dark right now, one could see that the girl's eyes were shining brightly. In this darkness, no one would be able to discover anyone's location, except for the person who cast this spell. Before the darkness faded away, he was the master of this place, so he could know the location of anyone in this darkness. Another dark spell was cast from a dark corner. A cold smile hung on his face, as if he could already see the death of that cold youth. So what if he was a genius? A dead genius, no matter how talented he was, what could he do? Even the upper echelons of the Yi family knew that Shiat had a hobby of killing geniuses. He had killed plenty of commoner geniuses as well as nobles. Of course, those he killed were the geniuses of smaller nobles. Shiat wouldn't provoke the geniuses of the bigger families. As an elder of the family, he knew the principle of picking the soft persimmon to bully. This was also the reason why Shiat wasn't punished for killing so many geniuses over the years. As long as he didn't cause trouble for the Liya family, they wouldn't stop him from using this small nickname. Now that another genius had appeared in front of him, Shiat licked his lips in excitement, as if he could already imagine the scene of that white-haired genius lying in a pool of blood. Shiat had already finished preparing his spell, and as long as he cast it, he believed that Skycliff and his companions wouldn't be able to survive the attack of his advanced dark spell. Brat, remember this is the consequence of offending the Liya family. Shiat was about to cast his spell in the direction of Skycliff and Fengwu. I told you you talk too much nonsense. A cold voice slowly approached, accompanied by the footsteps of the Grim Reaper. Shiat wanted to dodge, but it was too late. He didn't even have time to feel any pain before he lost all signs of life and fell to the ground with a thud. Due to Shiat's death, the dark spell was dispelled and everyone regained their sight. It was as if the darkness had never existed. The faint moonlight shone on everyone's body. The darkness of the night was originally a blessing for dark mages. Because his magic was cast at night, it was even more powerful. If it was cast during the day, it could make people lose their light for 30 seconds. But if it was cast at night, it could make people lose their light for a minute and a half. A full minute and a half in which many things could happen. No one would have thought that Shiat, a hunter, would actually be killed by the prey he had set his sights on. Everyone who had just recovered from the darkness looked at Tianya in disbelief. This youth's strength was clearly not at the level of a great swordsman, but he was able to kill Shiat, who had the strength of a great magician. This was simply unbelievable. I'm dreaming, right? Or is it because it's too dark and my eyes are playing tricks on me? Cohen rubbed his eyes in a daze. Shiat was the Linya family's dark element genius. A dark magician was a powerful magician. Even Cohen himself wasn't confident that he could kill Shiat. But now, a student who was obviously weaker than them had done it. Anyone who saw this scene would find it unreal. I wish I was dreaming, but it's not. Milline smiled bitterly. How is this possible? This can't be real. Impossible. How did Shiat die? How did he die? Farley roared in his heart. He was the one who couldn't remain calm. Farley was very clear about Shiat's strength. The lethality of Shiat's dark magic was astonishing. Moreover, it also had a curse effect. If one was injured by dark magic and couldn't find a light magician to remove the curse, then they would be tortured by the curse until they wished they were dead. Shiat was a great magician. In Farley's heart, his strength was very strong. Farley knew that he wouldn't have the upper hand if he fought Shiat. But now Shiat was dead. It was no wonder Farley found it hard to believe. Are you going to fight as well? Skycliff's expression was still indifferent. He didn't seem to be excited about killing a great magician. It was as if it was a normal thing. Seeing Skycliff so calm, Farley weighed the pros and cons in his heart. Skycliff was able to kill Shiat despite his dark magics. This was proof of Skycliff's strength. If he really fought with Skycliff, even if he won, it would be a very dangerous victory. Kid, I'll let you go this time. The next time we meet, this old man won't let you go so easily. After throwing down these harsh words, Farley hurriedly left the place with the few surviving juniors and guards. Fortunately, no one stopped them from leaving. Skycliff also didn't have the leisure to chase after Farley. They're leaving just like that? Let's go. This time the Idori and Lianya families have lost a lot of face. Why don't you think Farley and that kid fought? What else could it be? He's afraid of death. Shiat is already dead. Farley's strength is at most on par with Shiat's. He might not even be as strong as Shiat. How could he not run at this time? The surrounding onlookers discussed among themselves. Even the survivors of the Lianya family had disappeared without a trace. They probably went back to report the news of Shiat's death. The people of the Idori family had already run away. Cohen originally wanted to go up and talk to Skycliff, but Mingxi had already led everyone away. He didn't care about what the people behind him were saying. Drew followed beside Fengwu and saw a shocking reversal of events. He originally thought that Fengwu and the others wouldn't be able to keep their lives. As a friend, Drew couldn't bring himself to run for his life. He was already prepared to die with Fengwu and the others. He didn't expect that they wouldn't die in the end. Not only did they not die, even that elder Shiat was killed by Skycliff. Drew looked at Skycliff with eyes full of worship. So powerful, so powerful. He was actually able to kill a great magician of a higher rank. Furthermore, it was a dark magician who was publicly acknowledged as the most difficult to deal with. He was simply too strong. After leaving the tomb of the god of sin, the two-realm battlefield seemed to have returned to its original state. The undead army that had disappeared without a trace appeared again. Fengwu and the others killed quite a number of undead along the way, and only then did they find a relatively safe place to set up camp and rest. Chapter 172. Everyone had gained a lot from entering the tomb of the god of sin. Of course, the one who gained the most was definitely Irene. However, after Irene came out of the tomb of the god of sin, she disappeared without a trace. No one knew where she was hiding. That Irene is simply too despicable. She snatched the inheritance and ran away, but she almost caused us to be killed. If it wasn't for Senior Skycliff, I really don't know what would have happened to all of us in the end. Eve ate the soup and barbecued meat prepared by Zicheng. The thought of Irene filled her stomach with anger. You can't blame Irene. She didn't know it would turn out like this, did she? Zicheng smiled gently. Although she had a feeling that the inheritance should have belonged to her, she had the favorability system in her hands. She could have any inheritance she wanted. Even if it was taken away, she didn't care that much. However, she still felt uncomfortable that something that belonged to her had been snatched away. Of course, Zicheng couldn't say these feelings in front of so many people. She didn't want others to think that she was a narrow-minded person. But she clearly knew that you were the one who discovered the inheritance first. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have known the location of the tomb of the god of sin, and we wouldn't have been able to enter the tomb of the god of sin first. That was originally an opportunity that belonged to you, but now it was snatched away by Irene. She is simply ungrateful. Mingxi and the others quietly ate the food in their bowls without making a sound. Fengwu had always been oblivious to what was going on outside when she ate, so naturally, she couldn't pay attention to what Eve was saying. She was happily eating a roasted demon lamb leg. Elena had obtained this demon lamb leg in the tomb of the god of sin. At that time, she had killed a few demon lambs and put away the corpses, preparing to roast them early to eat. Now that they were out, they naturally had their eyes on the demon mutton. Speaking of which, the demon mutton was roasted with Zicheng's special spices. It was so delicious that it made people want to swallow their tongues. Eve spoke vehemently, but unfortunately, other than Zicheng, no one paid any attention to her. Everyone knew that she had plotted against Fengwu in the tomb of the gods. Mingxi and the others were very disgusted with her character. If it weren't for Zicheng pleading for her, they wouldn't have bothered with Eve at all. Zicheng persuaded a few more times, then changed the topic without leaving a trace. He could clearly feel that Elena didn't like Eve. Even Senior Mingxi and the others looked at Eve strangely, always with a hint of indifference. It was clearly not like this in the past. Zicheng only needed to think for a moment to know that the problem was probably in the first stage. He didn't know what happened in the first stage that caused Senior Elena and the others to change their attitudes like this. Everyone had their own thoughts on this night. Just like that, everyone passed the last night in the two-realm battlefield peacefully. When Mingxi and the others returned to Notre Dame du Starlight, a few days had already passed. Fortunately, Mingxi and the others covered for them this time. Peiqing wasn't caught and returned to Central City safely. However, the bounty on Peiqing had always been at the top. Now the bounty had already reached 500,000 gold coins. So much money. Ajur and the others drooled when they saw it. If it weren't for Peiqing being so difficult to deal with and being so cunning, they would have definitely handed him over. This way they would be able to earn 500,000 gold coins. Although this idea was beautiful, it was a pity that Peiqing wasn't willing to cooperate at all. Everyone could only look at the bounty and sigh. Other than giving Drew the antidote spirit fruit, Fengwu could be said to have gained the most from this trip. Because those magical beasts all liked her very much, Fengwu had collected many good things in her spatial ring. Speaking of Drew, Ever since they left the two-realm battlefield, Fengwu gave him an antidote spirit fruit that Drew wanted. Drew took the spirit fruit and thanked her repeatedly. He was so touched that his eyes turned red. Although it was just a fruit, if it was sold at the auction house it could fetch a lot of money. After thanking Fengwu again and again and saying that he would definitely go to Central City to visit her if he had the chance, Drew reluctantly bid farewell to everyone and went back to save his father. Mingxi and the others were seniors. When they returned to Central City, they separated from Fengwu and the others. No one knew what they were going to do. As for Fengwu and Ajur, they went to visit Tianyu's family first and had a big meal at Tianyu's house before returning to school to cancel their leave. Pei Qing and the others seemed to have used the money they earned to buy a small house in the city. Now they finally became snails with a shell, and didn't have to stay in hotels all the time. The adventure ended just like that. Fengwu and Ajur returned to school and checked the rankings. Because the two of them had just earned a large sum of money, they had now rushed into the top 10. The first place was still occupied by Zicheng, and the second place just happened to be Irene. By the way, Eve's ranking wasn't low either. In fact, it was slightly higher than Fengwu and Ajur. Although Rika's ranking wasn't in the top 10, it was still within the top 50. If there were no accidents, this money-making mission would probably end with this ranking. Even if there were changes in the rankings in the future, it wouldn't change too much. After returning to school, Fengwu's life began to revolve around school again. Occasionally, she would go out to accept a mission, but she wouldn't go too far away. Before she knew it, the semester was almost over. Looking back at her life for the past half of the semester, it seemed that she had been very busy. Other than attending classes, she was busy making money. She didn't even have much time to go out and have fun. Xiao Wu, did you hear? The ranking for this mission is out. You and Ajur are tied for 5th place. I heard that the school will give you a reward. When you get the reward, you have to take it out and let me see. The seniors of the previous batches kept their rewards a secret and didn't want to reveal anything. I'm guessing it must be something good. Emogui pulled a stool over to sit beside Fengwu. He couldn't wait to share the latest news with Fengwu. Okay, I'll show it to you. Fengwu nodded and agreed readily. Speaking of which, you and Ajur are really amazing. Our swordsman department has 3 people in it, but you're the only one in our class. The other 2 are 3rd and 4th place, but they're not from our class. Their mage department also has 3 people in the top 5. This time, because you and Ajur are tied for 5th place, there are 6 people in the top 5. Our 2 departments just happen to have 3 people in each department, so there's no need to fight. It's just that the mage department is very proud now. Although our swordsman department and their mage department each have 5 spots in the top 10, their overall ranking is higher than ours. The other departments didn't earn much because they learned relatively weak things in the beginning. Not many of them made it into the top 50, but this was normal. For example, although the alchemy department made more money in the later stages, that was only after they became junior alchemists. Chapter 173. As long as a pharmacist student grows up, they won't have to worry about money. However, their luck isn't too good. This money-making mission will only be more beneficial to them after a year or 2. Emogui Tao continued to talk about the news he had heard. Emogui Tao had been paying attention to these rumors in the school. By the way, Xiao Wu, I don't know what happened to Eve, who was originally ranked 3rd, but she was given a major demerit by the school on the grounds that she violated the school rules. If she gets 3 major demerits, she will have to drop out of school. I really don't understand what kind of mistake a freshman like her could make to be given a major demerit. I also heard that this time, Zicheng voluntarily gave up the reward for 1st place in exchange for a major demerit for Eve. If it weren't for Zicheng, she would have been expelled. When Emogui heard the news, he was shocked. The school rarely gave students major demerits. Moreover, it wasn't just a demerit at the beginning but a direct expulsion. What exactly did Eve do to make the school decide to expel her? It was written that she violated the school rules, but which rule did she violate? Teacher, why didn't you explain clearly? Making us guess like this is too much. I was just talking about this. Do any of you have insider information? Our school hasn't had a major demerit for decades. They didn't even mention the reason, just saying that she violated the school rules. If they don't explain clearly, it makes my heart itch. Isn't that so? I'm dying of curiosity too. I strongly urge the school to disclose the reason for the major demerit so that we can learn from it and avoid committing the same mistake again. Come on, to be given a major demerit and expelled, how big of a mistake would it be? Maybe it's colluding with the demons or something like that. Colluding with the demons? You're really good at guessing. If that's the case, it wouldn't just be expulsion but execution. That's true. It was obvious that although Eve's demerit had just happened, it had already spread throughout the school. There was no entertainment in the school, and the students' lives were very dull and boring. It was not easy for one or two pieces of gossip to happen, so of course, there would be a lot of people fighting to spread the news. Fengwu listened quietly. Regarding Eve's demerit, Fengwu really didn't know what was going on. She completely didn't expect that this matter had a lot to do with her. Now, Eve's hatred for her was probably as deep as the sea. Fengwu didn't know this. She never cared about Eve, so of course she wouldn't care if Eve hated her. Speaking of the reason for Eve's demerit, it had to start with what happened in the tomb of the god of sin. In order to prevent her stupidity from being exposed, Eve actually laid a hand on Fengwu and framed her. And all of this was seen by the senior Elena. Elena was a straightforward person to begin with. She didn't have the slightest good impression of someone like Eve who plotted against a classmate. Although she didn't say anything in the tomb of the god of sin, she still reported this matter to the school when she returned. Eve was summoned to the office for a talk, and under the means of the teachers, she was seen through before she even had a chance to lie. Originally, with her major evil act of framing a classmate, she should have been kicked out of school. However, she was lucky to have such a good sister like Zicheng. Zicheng was originally the first student in this new student's mission. The first student would receive certain privileges from the school, and Zicheng directly used this privilege to exchange for the opportunity to let Eve stay in school. Elena and several other teachers tried to persuade Zicheng, but Zicheng insisted on protecting Eve no matter what. This made Elena and several other teachers who cared about Zicheng sigh endlessly. Although Elena admired Zicheng's attitude of sacrificing her own interests for a friend, Elena didn't have the slightest good impression of the person who made her sacrifice. At the same time, she naturally felt that Zicheng wasn't worth it. She also deeply sighed for her poor judgment. Because of Zicheng's intervention, Eve was of course able to stay in school in the end. However, a major demerit couldn't be forced. Fortunately, Zicheng also knew her limits. She knew where the teacher's bottom line was. She also wouldn't go overboard. If she still pleaded for leniency at this time, not only would she not gain the teacher's favor, she would also attract the impression that she didn't know when to stop. Zicheng came to plead for leniency for Eve, not only because she wanted to save a good friend or something like that. What she wanted the most was to use this opportunity to increase the teacher's favorability. Fortunately, her plan was carried out very smoothly. The teachers appreciated her behavior of not giving up on her friend, and their favorability rose by a lot. Their dislike of Eve also rose in a straight line. Zicheng's act of caring for her friend and sacrificing her own interests also increased her favorability in the class by quite a lot. There were also sympathy points. Everyone sympathized with her for being dragged down by that stupid bad woman, Eve. Seeing the increasing favorability, Zicheng was overjoyed in her heart. However, she still had a bashful smile on her face. As for Eve, she had long been touched by Zicheng. It probably wouldn't be a problem for her to die for Zicheng. Irene sat in the distance and watched as Zicheng used Eve to show off. She was very disdainful in her heart. As expected of the female lead, she really didn't let go of any opportunity to increase her favorability. Irene had returned not long after Fengwu, and the others had returned to school. That day, Erin snatched the inheritance, and used her trump card that she had never revealed to anyone before, successfully escaping from the divine tomb. She left the two-realm battlefield without stopping, and found a place to hide. Only after she had completely fused with the inheritance did she return to the academy. By now, her strength had already increased by quite a bit. That acquired god just so happened to be a powerful wood elemental sorcerer god. She also had wood elemental magic talent, so she successfully integrated the inheritance. After Irene received the sorcerer god's inheritance, her combat strength and healing ability had increased by several levels. As for that Eve, after she returned, she spread the rumor that she had snatched Zicheng's inheritance. Many students believed Eve's words and treated her coldly. Fortunately, Eve didn't gloat for too long. Now retribution had come. TSK. She thought that she was a good person. She was just someone who framed her classmates. If she wanted to harm someone, she should have done it more covertly. She did it in front of Elena. If she wasn't a fool, what was she? No wonder this Eve was played around by Zicheng. She really had a pig's brain. With such a pig's teammate, it would be a joke if she didn't drag them down. Not to mention Irene's reaction to this matter. Feng Wu's class discussed Eve's demerit for a long time. In the end, they didn't come to any conclusion. The school did a good job of keeping this matter a secret. They didn't leak anything at all. This made the students who wanted to hear the gossip secretly beat their chests and stomp their feet. It had only been a few days since Eve was given a major demerit, and another major event had happened in the school. The results of the freshman money-making mission had finally been announced. As Zicheng had given up on his reward, the school had only given the top 10 students a reward. Chapter 174. The top 5 originally received a top-quality sensory stone, and the first place could even make a request to the school. In the past, the first place had always kept this request a secret, not easily making a request to the school. What a joke, how could this request be casually made? Of course it would be saved up for later use. Only Zicheng would be stupid enough to use it to save Eve. Zicheng, on the other hand, didn't regret it. She had raised quite a bit of favorability in the past few days, and quite a few people's favorability had already risen to 90. If she worked a little harder, 100 wouldn't be far away. The 6th to 10th place each received an advanced sensory stone, and the 11th to 50th place received an intermediate sensory stone. After 50th place there was nothing. As for what the sensory stone was, the school didn't specifically explain. They only said that when the next semester started, most of them would need it. This time's mission was easy for some people, but it was very difficult for most people. Most of the students didn't reach the goal they set. They had to earn the money they promised before the end of the next semester, or else they would have to repeat a year in the next semester to continue this mission. Actually, this mission wouldn't take more than a year for people with ability. For example, Zicheng, Irene, and the others were the best examples. This was also the reason why the results were only released halfway through the semester. According to the school's rules, only the top 50 students had been selected before the results could be announced. As for those students who didn't manage to complete their goals in one semester, they would have to use the second half of the semester to continue this task. Of course, if there was someone in the second half of the year who could successfully make a comeback and squeeze into the top 50, then they would also receive the reward they deserved. However, the Notre Dame du Starlight had been open for so many years, and it wasn't that there weren't any who could make a comeback. In the past few thousand years there were only 1 or 2 who could make a comeback. Needless to say, the chances of making a comeback and entering the top 50 were very slim. After the simple award ceremony, the first years returned to their classrooms. Because this was only a first-year mission, only the first years were present. Students from other years wouldn't come. After returning to the classroom, Feng Wu received all the items that the teacher had taken away. Speaking of which, at the beginning of the money-making mission, the teacher had ordered all the students' spatial equipment and crystal cards to be confiscated. At that time, many students in the class were unwilling. Feng Wu also didn't want to let the ring leave her, but because it was the school's request, she had no choice but to comply. Later on, because he had to go on a mission, and Little Bun could no longer be brought away with him using the spatial ring, Ajur went to find his teacher. In the end, through some unknown method, his teacher agreed to only take away the items in the spatial ring, and not the spatial equipment. Later, many students found out that they could do this. Of course, they went to their teachers immediately and used the same method to get back their spatial equipment. He also promised his teacher that he would never sell his spatial equipment to raise money to complete the mission. Of course, there were also some students who didn't ask the teachers for their spatial equipment, because they didn't want the items in their spatial equipment to explode. When retrieving her spatial equipment, Feng Wu counted the items in the spatial ring in front of the teachers. At that time, when those rare items were sorted out, even the teachers were shocked. They really couldn't tell that Feng Wu was actually a nouveau riche. These magic cores and all kinds of magic materials, many of them were high-quality goods that couldn't be bought outside. There were even some rare ores that were said to only be produced in a few dangerous places. There were many nouveau riches in the school, but the only one who could be so rich that the teachers didn't dare to believe it was Fengwu. Although the other students' family conditions were very good, they were still only students. Of course, the truly valuable things in their family couldn't be placed on a child. Those teachers didn't know that Fengwu actually didn't know how valuable the things in the ring were. Ever since she got the ring from little Yu, Fengwu didn't carefully look at what was inside. She just used it to store more things. Although she didn't look carefully, Fengwu still knew that there weren't many things in the ring. There was only a small pile. Don't expect a girl who just transmigrated to know the value of these local items. The Fengwu girl who only liked to eat usually didn't even bother to look at these things. Don't talk about understanding what was inside the ring and knowing how much it was worth. Xiaowu, you're really too lucky. You actually got a grade sensing stone. This thing is very valuable. If you want a grade sensing stone, you have to use a lot of credits to exchange for it. Even the seniors in the upper grades can't afford it. Black Gui immediately moved to Fengwu's side and said with a face full of envy, Emogui's luck this time wasn't bad. He got a good result in the 30th place and obtained a medium-grade sensing stone. Although it wasn't high-grade or top quality, he still felt quite satisfied. Fengwu took out a white crystal-like stone from the ring. This was the mission's ultimate reward, a top-grade sensing stone. Don't look down on this stone just because it was the size of a baby's fist. At Notre Dame du Starlight, one had to spend an astronomical amount of credits to exchange for it from a teacher. This is it. As expected of a top-grade one. The color is so clear, and you can't even see the slightest bit of impurity. It's really beautiful. Emogui exclaimed in surprise. His expression was like that of a 10,000-year-old bachelor who suddenly saw a peerless beauty. No matter how one looked at it, it was wretched. The surrounding students all took a few steps back, not wanting to pay attention to this embarrassing fellow. You're drooling. Fengwu looked at the excited Emogui and sternly reminded him. Ah! He quickly wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth and smiled shyly at Fengwu. Xiaowu, can I touch you? Touch stones? What kind of hobby was that? Although Fengwu didn't understand, she still nodded generously. At the same time, she handed the top-grade sensing stone to Emogui. Emogui received it as if he was on a pilgrimage, his eyes filled with a hint of fanaticism. What exactly is that stone? Look at Emogui. It's like he's seen a peerless beauty. A female student standing not far from Emogui asked curiously as she pointed at Emogui's embarrassing appearance. Actually, for it to be used as a reward for the top 5, they could already guess that it must be very precious. However, as for how precious it was, not many people knew about it. At the very least, most of the people in the class did not know. That's right. He didn't even explain. Look at him. I'm afraid that the top-grade sensing stone is something incredible. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.